Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 20th meeting of the Morro Bay Planning Commission. Let the record reflect that Commissioners Lucas, Lure, and Gracia and myself are present. We do have a quorum, and the meeting is called to order. Let us start, as is our custom, with a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. Would you all join us? Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a brief period set aside here for Planning Commissioner announcements. Are there any announcements this evening? We're deficient in announcements in that Commissioner Sadowski is not present, but we'll soldier on. Very well. This is then we come to the public comment period. This is a time that is available for public comments on any topic, whether or not it's on this evening's agenda. So if there's anyone here who would like to speak to the commission tonight, please step forward, give us your name, and we'd love to hear from you. Seeing none, then, we will close public comment, bring it back to the commission for the consent calendar, item number A. We have under the consent calendar A1, the current and advanced planning processing list, and A2, the minutes from the meeting of November 1st, 2016. Are there any comments, questions?
I believe in the minutes, it's showing that I'm absent and then seconding things. So I think I was there. I may have been late.
We will rectify that.
Any other issues with the minutes or the planning processing list? If not, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Move as amended.
Second?
And I second it.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. We are going to change the order of business a little bit tonight because we have one item which we anticipate will be relatively brief, and we have a staff member who's hungry. What we'd like to do then is put address item number D1, which is the review of the landscape plan for a project that we saw a meeting or so ago at the Silver City RV and Mobile Home Park, and the staff member on this is Joan. I think you're going to give us a presentation on this.
Can I get a motion and a second to change the order of the agenda?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please. I want to make it official.
Thank you for keeping us on track.
Also move.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we will move on to our staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Teft, and good evening, Commissioners. So the first item before you this evening is for the, like Chairman Teft had mentioned, at 500 Atascadero Road at the Silver City RV Park. At the November 1st, 2016 Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission reviewed and subsequently voted 5-0 to conditionally approve a proposal for a change in use from commercial storage to an RV park. We're here tonight to discuss the landscape plan. That was a condition of approval that was added at the end of that meeting. The portion of the project that's located adjacent to the public right-of-way along Atascadero Road is required to be screened from the street. Maybe. You can see here, this image to the west is at the top of your screen. There's a line of landscaped screening along the hardware store there at the bottom of your screen. What's circled in red is where the oleander will continue along that line, and then it will jog in and continue up to the west. This is the landscape plan showing the oleander at the top and the irrigation plan along the bottom. The landscape plan includes 18 oleander bushes, 15 gallons in size, utilizing drip irrigation and bark mulch to help with the evaporation of water. And so it's therefore staff's recommendation that Planning Commission approve the landscape plan for the conditional use permit UP 0458 at 500 Atascadero Road.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for staff?
Excuse me. What exactly is supposed to be screened, and from what point?
The RV parking there is supposed to be screened from the street, from Atascadero Road.
41?
From Highway 41, yes.
Okay.
Other questions for staff? I just, if you know, Joan, how big is a 15-gallon oleander bush in terms of the canopy, the actual foliage?
I'd guesstimate 3 feet, between 2.5 to 3.5 feet wide. I believe by about 6 feet, I'd say 4 to 6 feet in height.
Okay. Okay, very good. If there are no other questions for staff, this is unfinished business, but we would be happy to open for public comment. If anyone has any comments on this item, we'd be happy to hear from you. Seeing none, then we will bring it back to the commission for discussion. Any comments or thoughts?
I drive that almost daily. There's a lot of gaps in the adjacent screening, and maybe this is part of Commissioner Lohr's concerns, that they don't seem to hide anything there when there's gaps. So do we have an idea how long it's going to take to fill in for this part?
I do not know, sir.
Okay.
Well, my concern is that the oleanders don't really hide the park. They hide the, the existing ones are a pretty good indication of what these are going to be in 5 or 10 years. And in driving down there, you maybe from your automobile, it'll hide the height of the first trailer or the first RV, and from that point on, you still see the rest of the park, and you see the more so you see the roofs of these parks of these RVs, which are usually white, and I would like to see something taller, more in the way of put in something like a Monterey pine or a cypress or something included here that would go up above the 8 feet or 7 feet that these oleanders are now. Because when you're in a vehicle, you still see the rest of the park. And where the new plot is, you're going to see that more because it's further away from this screen. So effectively, I don't think this screening, I don't think the existing screening really, serves the purpose. So.
I would note that this screening is proposed at the top of the slope, whereas the existing oleander bushes are not at the top of the slope.
Right.
Hence, part of the issue related to screening. So that will help some because they'll be starting off higher, and so you'll get a little bit more coverage as they grow up. I would also note that I think if you started putting in trees in that location, I'd be concerned because once you get to the top of the slope, there's not a lot of room between the edge of pavement there, and we don't want trees that are extending out into the travel lanes over there. That could be dangerous. So,
But they could be placed in planters in the, in the parking areas if there's, I think we had enough parking in that park. So they could help break up the sea of white roofs in there. So that's my concern, and, so I'd like to hear from the rest of the commissioners.
Joe?
When I went to look at it, I just saw that it was consistent with the existing oleander plants, and frankly, I hadn't really thought about increasing the coverage. It would be a good thing. I guess I'm sort of actively thinking about it right now. I haven't formed an opinion.
Well, I would like to say first of all, we do have quite a few existing oleander bushes at this location. I would, and so, having another 15 or so oleander bushes probably doesn't change the danger there, but oleanders are really very poisonous. And I would, if we were starting from scratch and saying, what are we going to put along here, I would be very, very opposed to oleanders for that purpose. But as I say, there's, if an animal or a human wants to eat oleanders, there's certainly an ample supply already there. So it probably doesn't make a difference given the current situation. I don't know technically. I'm not technically wise enough to know this. I guess I'll have to trust the architect on this. It seems like this is a very long drip line, and I don't know how many emitters you can put on one drip line and have it still be effective, but it's 150 feet before you even get to the part that we have diagrams. So I would, if this moves forward as is, I would like to ask staff to look into that and make sure that the length of this is appropriate.
We can require them to provide the calculations that would go along with the design to qualify it.
And then the final comment I have is we have a landscape. This is a landscaping plan, but it only deals with the front of the property, and I'm wondering if there's been any consideration to, greenery has a number of benefits. Screening is one of them, but it certainly also adds to the quality of life of people who live there to have greenery and vegetation within the park, and there's really not been any consideration of that. And I wonder why the applicant has not considered that as as part of the function of landscaping.
I think really what they were doing is responding to the Planning Commission at the last meeting and putting in the primary focus of the commentary that came out of the Planning Commission was in relationship to that area because there wasn't anything shown there. And so they had talked about, hey, we'll fill this in, and that's what they brought back. I don't know that they looked anywhere beyond that because even the proposal that came before you wasn't for the main park, it was for those two storage areas.
Right.
But you're right. They're not showing anything else, but I think that's really, they thought this is what you were looking for, I think, is probably more to the point.
In their original proposal, they had just drawn in that the oleander bushes are going to go here, and your direction was for them to come back with a legitimate landscape plan that showed the drip irrigation and the number of plants and the size and so forth of the screening requirement.
I think they showed a pretty limited scope inside the park itself. There was only 2 areas, if I remember right, that they were. I think it's been cleaned out. It's pretty good to go see how much space that actually entailed. When I came in tonight, you could see pretty well. But my biggest concern is if we try to increase the height, it could have some impact on the street, but the major impact is for the people who live on the hill opposite. And I don't think there's anything we're going to plant there that's going to really do that unless we get some really substantial trees in there. And I'm not sure we've got the width to pull that kind of thing off. I'm not an arborist about how much of the canopy has to be pervious, but yeah, I don't think we're going to cover the roofs of the RVs from any taller vehicles, and especially not from the housing across the street. That's going to get more housing over time too. That's well, at least I guess that's farther down is the large vacant lot opposite the other trailer park that's there. Yeah.
Michael, if they're interspersed trees inside the parking area and then further into their developed area in the park, then it would break up that monotonous of the white roofs. And that's, and our concerns, or my concern isn't so much from the housing across the street as from the traffic on 41. And that's our major entrance into the city. So having trees internally in the park or even in the areas where they're doing the work would help break up that, would help screen the existing areas where they're doing the proposal. So, and there's, and this will screen the wall line, but it won't screen the roof line even on the first row of RVs.
Although my impression, and I go to Miners a lot, so so I do drive by there. I don't know. My impression. I'm not personally, and this is just my personal reaction. I'm not struck by the kind of sea of RVs over there. Because number one, they're set back from the roadaways, the fences, and number two, there's a lot of other stuff going on there. There's the liquor store and the gas station, and sort of breaking that up a little bit, I do recognize, as staff has said, that what we asked them to do was to come back and show us how they were going to do the screening with not too much more direction than that. So, I guess I'm inclined to go ahead and approve this. I'll just, again, my personal thing. But I also, and secondly, we're only dealing with these 2 extensions. That's all we even got plans for. We're not really dealing with the park as a whole. But I would sort of like to lay out there for staff and for the public that I think when we look at a project like this, I don't think we really should differentiate an RV park from any other neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? And I think when we look at landscape plans for an RV park or mobile home development, we really should look at them with the same eyes that we do when we look at a single-family residence or an apartment building. And so, that's not something we've really dealt with. I don't feel it's fair to make this applicant suffer from the fact that we haven't made that clear. But I think as we move forward in the future, a community is a community, whether it's manufactured housing or stick-built housing or mobile homes, so I think when we look at another project like this, we might take a closer look at the internal landscaping as well as the external landscaping.
I have a question. Is it fair to say that the existing portion of the... Is it fair to say that the existing portion of the RV park doesn't have much in the way of vegetation? I visited it, but it was some time ago. I don't seem to recall very much there.
That's fair to say, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And, I am thinking that, in terms of appearances, this is certainly a net improvement in terms of several vacant lots, particularly one near the highway that seem to have a lot of discarded materials there. And I like the chairman, I'm a little reluctant to sort of add an additional note or burden without really having given them some expectation that that's what they should have provided us with.
The other thing I'd say is it certainly looks from the Google Earth image that in addition to that existing line being at the bottom of the slope, there are some gaps there. It wouldn't bother me if we'd asked them to fill some of those gaps with something larger, and maybe space them out. I don't know. It looks to me like there's gaps probably every 40-some feet.
There are several gaps in the existing hedge.
Yeah.
I mean, we could ask them to plant trees in those locations. Those ones are down the slope, so further back.
Mm-hmm.
Planting them in the new location is a problem for several reasons. One, people ride bikes along the edge of the highway there. That would not be great for that. Two, there's utility lines above, literally right above the top of the bank. That's also a problem. But I think putting them down at the bottom, we could put trees in some of those gaps, and if you'd like, and that wouldn't necessarily be super expensive for the applicant to do either. That'd be relatively inexpensive for them to take care of that. So we could add that as a condition if you're into that. If you'd like that. Yeah.
I think a lot of folks, if you've got access to Google Earth, if you look at the pattern that Miners has in its parking lot, there's nothing like that in either of the RV parks. And although this seems to be superior, what we're getting tonight from what Miners has along Route 41 at its parking area. So the screening for the parking, I think, is probably satisfactory. The screening, if we want to try to enhance screening of the park itself, we might start with something like this. And I don't believe the adjacent park, if that ever comes before us, has much of anything there now. In fact, they seem to be making their parking directly in the right-of-way, which I imagine wouldn't be a best practice were we to bring that forward at some point. So do we want to ask them to amend the plan for an additional, 4, 6?
I think we can have us work with them to place them in the gaps that are there. I'm comfortable doing that, and we'll look at how many of them there are and identify where we'd like to place them. And we'll get the most bang for our buck out of that. Put them where they make sense. So certainly, if you're comfortable with that, I'd like to go out there and look at it and say, these are the places we'd like to put them.
So, should we put that as a condition?
Yeah, let's add that as the
Condition that the applicants will work with staff to locate trees in appropriate locations along the frontage.
along where the existing hedge is, or along the existing hedge. Yeah. Okay. We can do that.
Does that work? Does that work for everyone? Okay.
If there's any places, adjacent to the newly developed areas, it would be nice to have some landscaping in there. I know we didn't bring that up, so their expectation, was just on the screening, but but I think that's, that's essentially part of the screening too. So does staff think that there are any places they could add, a tree or two in the new development areas? Or can we carve that?
Within the new development areas?
Yeah.
We didn't ask them to provide us landscaping in those areas. We have the layouts. I think we have the layouts for those areas. Yeah. If you give us a direction, we'll talk with the applicant about making some of that happen in those two areas, because you're right, that the entirety of the park doesn't have much landscaping.
Right.
And so if we can't do anything else, at least maybe get landscaping at the entryways to the loops, because those are already designed, and on the one side, they're already basically in. They were put in the infrastructure when we stopped work them. So they're a little bit kind of stuck with the configurations that they have.
I'm not trying to be onerous about this, but, if there's an area we can have a tree there that would break up that internal monotony of the site.
I'm comfortable going down there if the commission would like to give that direction.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with that direction. I wouldn't want to make it mandatory, though, because we did approve the plans as they were presented to us. I mean, we'd kind of be going back on our word if we, made it mandatory.
But it was also, we were presented with something that was, was almost a fait accompli, and so if we saw this from the first aspect of it, we probably would have gone a different route to begin with. So I think we've moved, I don't want to be, like I said, I don't want to be punitive, but if there's some way we can break up the monotony of those roofs, that would be great.
I think from a staff standpoint, I'm comfortable sitting down with them and looking at areas where they might be able to add some landscaping into those two areas, into those two new areas, and happy to do that. And again, we're not talking something that would cost a significant amount of money, so it's not going to, I don't think, be overly burdensome to the applicant. And I think we've moved, and I think the Planning Commission, has moved fairly quickly, like was indicated by Commissioner Luer, to address an issue that we had out there. They got stuck between state agencies and the city, and it was an unfortunate situation. And so you were certainly, I think, thinking in that direction when you moved forward with the approval, so we could move them forward, and that was, I think, much appreciated by the applicant. So
Great,
I think we can work that. I think we can work through this, and it's reasonable. I think also, given how this approval went forward and how the project came forward, I don't think it's overly onerous.
I'm much more comfortable with that.
Okay, we will work with them to make that happen.
So I think we're sort of at a consensus here. Do we have a motion to approve the project with the conditions added?
I'll move that we approve this project. Don't have the numbers with me right now.
It's just approving the landscape plan.
The landscape plan for CUP, what was it?
We don't have that.
Okay.
That project.
It's just the landscape.
The landscape plan.
I'll second.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion on the motion? I would just like to say, I think we're coming away from this discussion with the kind of a new awareness regarding the expectations for landscaping in situations like this, in denser type of developments. And the mere fact that there's density does not negate the benefits of landscaping. So with that, then we'll call for a roll call, please.
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Commissioner Luer?
Yes.
Commissioner Ingraffia?
Yes.
And Chairman Teft?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your tuna fish sandwich.
Thank you, kind sir.
Okay, then we will back up to case number B1, which is a public hearing item. This would be case number UP0-448, involving a development at Gray's Inn, 561 Embarcadero here in Morro Bay. And I think Cindy is going to enlighten us on this.
Good evening, Chair Teft and members of the Planning Commission. This is a request for conditional use permit at 561 Embarcadero, currently the site of Gray's Inn, and the project before you is a commercial remodel project, which would propose a new harbor walk along the bayside, new bayside lateral access, vertical access to that harbor walk, as well as sidewalk improvements and building facade improvements. On the screen, you see site location of where the property, whoops. Sorry, this is a new clicker. How do you, where's the pointer? Oh, okay. And there is the project site location. Here is an image of the Gray's Inn lease site. This is a city lease site, and it's also known as lease site 6364 and water lease site 63W, 64W. It shows the existing Gray's Inn Hotel. There's an art gallery that faces the street, as well as an existing floating dock system and partial harbor walk, which I will have some images of in a bit. Street view image of the existing hotel, and it does have existing on-site parking. The lease site, is in the waterfront PD S4 zoning district, and it is located between Driftwood and Marina Streets. Here's the project description. So specifically, it does include new harbor walk lateral access where only a partial access exists leading up into the point of the gangway. The applicant proposes to install one new piling to support the harbor walk and sleeving of 4 existing pilings that currently support the floating dock system. As stated, a new widened vertical access that would be 4 feet in width, sidewalk improvements along Embarcadero Road, as well as miscellaneous building facade improvements. The applicant is proposing a phasing plan to accomplish those project details. And the phasing plan is shown here on the screen in 3 different phases. Phase 1 would be the street side sidewalk improvements and then opening up the area for the vertical access. Phase 2 would involve the harbor walk access construction. This harbor walk would also provide a connection point to the neighboring lease site to the north, which is known as the Salt Building. Currently, there is no ability for pedestrians to access that building. And then phase 3 is the building facade improvements, which would include roofing, decking repair, siding replacement. And here is that missing connection point that I just mentioned on the lateral access. This is an image from the eelgrass survey, and it shows the access for the Salt Building, this open area here, and you're looking at the rear of the Gray's Inn property. The harbor walk would connect to the Salt Building walkway, and it would be built mostly over land, except here at this outermost portion, and as I stated earlier, that's necessary to support the walkway. The plans show that the harbor walk would cover the entire width of the lease site, approximately 56 feet long. It will be required to jut out in an L shape so that it connects in with the Salt Building area, and that's because the existing area right here is ADA access. So in order to bump out, it has to match this elevation. The existing harbor walk that is currently there will be removed and reconstructed 18 inches higher so that it meets the same elevation as the Salt Building. Here's a site plan image that shows some of the images that I've shown you in earlier slides. The existing Gray's Inn, and then the vertical and lateral access. And then you see a portion of the floating dock system. And also on this plan is they are outlining location of existing small patches of eelgrass. There was an eelgrass survey that was performed by Tenera Environmental, and that is included in your staff report packet. So a portion of the 56-foot long lateral access is proposed to, I'm going to go back to the slide here, is proposed to narrow to 8 feet, and that is only the portion that is the width of the gangway. The gangway itself is 4 feet wide, and there will be a 2-foot encroachment of that gangway into the lateral access. The city's LCP does call out 8 feet for the minimum width for lateral access. It has been the policy of the Coastal Commission in recent years to require a minimum of 10 feet. And so during processing of the application, staff did reach out to Coastal Commission staff on several occasions to get their early feedback. As part of the regulations that govern this project, the applicant will be required, after conditional use permit approval by the city, to obtain a coastal development permit from Coastal Commission. And their feedback on the processing of that was solicited. Initially, the comments that they gave us is that they didn't see that that would be an issue to them. It represents 8 square feet, or in terms of linear length, about 7% of the walkway. Then in subsequent conversations, Coastal Commission staff did ask questions regarding whether or not the existing gangway could be pushed out, whether the floating dock system could be reconfigured to provide both the dock slips and as well as the 10-foot lateral access. So staff worked with the applicant on a number of different scenarios, and ultimately the applicant's architect submitted a evaluation that examined the 3 different approaches, leaving it as is, as they propose. Option 2 would be to push the gangway out westward to provide for that 10-foot unobstructed clearance, or possibly relocating the gangway from the south side of the dock system to the north side of the dock system. For safety considerations, and in order to avoid impacting existing eelgrass beds, the applicant is proposing to leave it as is, and staff concurs that this approach seemed to be the least disruptive to the existing dock system. Here's a side section of that, so you can see, and I do have some photos of the gangway too, but the gangway would be reconstructed for this 10-foot width, and then it narrows into this 8-foot. And here is what the dock currently looks like, and the gangway. And of course, you see that the gangway does not encroach at all onto this harbor walk that dead ends here. Of course, this is not the minimum 10 feet, and the proposal would lengthen the whole lease site, and we would have that important connection to salt building, but for this small little 4x2 area. And then here's another photo. These photos were taken and provided by the applicant. I believe they were taken within the last week to 2. They do show it at low tide, and also illustrate the steepness of the gangway. Here is a close-up of the site plan, and this also shows the location of, this is the location of the 1 new piling that would be put in, and the 4 existing pilings that would be sleeved. There are 2 at the east end of the dock system, and there are 2 at the west end of the floating dock system. And as part of the project review, as I stated, the applicant did submit an eelgrass survey for planning purposes prepared by Tenera Environmental. They were the same group that did the eelgrass surveys for the neighboring salt building to the north. And so they have surveyed this greater area since 2009. And their conclusion of the report showed that there was small amounts of eelgrass. The area where the new piling would go is less than 1/10 of a meter. In fact, I believe it might be 1/100th of a meter of eelgrass bed. It states in the eelgrass survey, one stem with 3 leaves. It's a very small area. Consistent with the requirements of the California Eelgrass Mitigation Policy, also known as the CMB, applicant would be required to submit pre- and post-construction eelgrass surveys, just documenting any disturbances if then. This was another reason why the applicant has proposed to leave the dock system as is in order to avoid any disturbances. And should the existing eelgrass beds migrate or change direction during the process. Here's elevation images that are shown in the plans. This is showing the south elevation with the harbor walk proposed and gangway and floating dock system. And then here is the street elevation looking at the front of the Gray's Inn with the vertical axis on the left side. To the left is the Kayak Horizons building, and to the right is the SELP building. Still getting a hang of this clicker here, the little different buttons. This slide here shows the existing view from Embarcadero and proposed view. So as part of the vertical axis improvements, the applicant is proposing to, there's an existing storage shed building in this area and a fence, and that will be removed to open up this view corridor here. The applicant has also proposed a stained concrete path, along with a coastal access sign to inform visitors of availability of public coastal access. And that's just highlighting that there on the screen for you. And then here is a visual simulation of the rear that the applicant has provided. And here's another image of that gap in the existing harbor walk that I've described. That area currently dead ends, as I said, at the gangway. This area is all open, and as part of the project, it would be filled in and provide that connection point to the SELP building with coastal access signs displayed both at the north and the south end of the lease site. In addition, the applicant is proposing a number of coastal access signage informing visitors of availability of coastal access, including availability of public boardwalk, coastal access signs, and then these 2 signs here are regarding fluctuation of the tides, as well as fluctuation of the tides. And then the 4th sign is actually a proposal for a historical interpretive panel sign, and the applicant is working with the Morro Bay Historical Society on what that content would be. That would be proposed. They do not have the specificity of what the sign would be, but it would be an interpretive sign informing visitors of historical nature of the Morro Bay working waterfront. And so staff will be recommending a condition of approval be added that the applicant work with staff on what that exact interpretive panel sign language state. And I'll get to that in my conclusion. Here's the location of those proposed signs. So coastal access signs at all 3 points at the street side, and then here along the north and south. And the applicant has stated interest in putting the historical sign near the gangway. And then as part of the environmental review under CEQA, staff determined that the project, based on the results of the Tenera environmental survey that was done, that the project would qualify for an exemption under Section 15303 for construction and location of new small facilities or structures. After the Planning Commission staff report was released, staff did get an email from the applicant's representative regarding a request to modify 3 of the conditions that are in the resolution for your consideration. They are planning conditions 6, 8, and 9, and I did put a copy of that email on the dais so that you could read that, and there is copies available for the public, as well as I translated that into, should the Planning Commission agree with the applicant's request, how that would look in a revised resolution, and that resolution is also available for the public to review on the table as well. To start with Planning Condition 6, this is a condition that states in summary that a marine wildlife contingency plan would be required and that it shall be approved by National Marine Fisheries Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and California Department of Fish and Wildlife prior to pile driving activities. And I highlighted there's one new pile proposed and then the sleeving of the 4 existing piles. The applicant is requesting, because of the small scale of the nature of the project, and for consistency with other past city-approved projects, that a marine wildlife contingency plan be developed and approved by City of Morro Bay prior to initiation of pile driving activities. And the reason for that is many of these agencies, quite frankly, take months to approve something like this, and a project of this small scale nature would likely not rise to the top of their to-do list. And so the request is to change the condition so that it reads as is written on the screen and at the bottom of the slide there. Planning Condition 8 is much longer in the resolution, and this is the condition that has to do with eelgrass reporting. And so in summary, what this condition says is that the applicant be required to provide pre- and post-eelgrass surveys along with annual eelgrass surveys. Previously on projects, the projects have always been subject to the Southern California eelgrass mitigation policy. Approximately 2 years ago, National Marine Fisheries Service changed the protocols, and now they require all projects to be subject to the CMB, California eelgrass mitigation policy. In this instance, the CMB is a little bit more specific on timing than the SCIMP was, the previous protocol. And so it does allow a little bit more specificity on when these eelgrass reports need to be done. And so consistent with that, the applicant's representative is requesting that the condition be changed to state that the pre-survey would be completed within 60 days before start of construction, as opposed to what staff recommended, which was no earlier than 90 days and no later than 30 days. It doesn't change any of the requirements, it just tweaks the language to be a little bit more clear and specific. And then also that a post-construction survey be completed within 30 days and the report due within 90 days of completion of construction. And then the proposed condition modification is continued here on the next slide, that this would be documented and reported to the Community Development Director, and that it be consistent with the specifications for eelgrass mitigation as provided in the CMP. And then I cited the version of the CMP that this project would be subject to, which is October 2014. And then the third request is a request to tweak planning condition number 9. In this condition, this is the condition that the city routinely requires when there's any pile driving. And the condition states that a pile driving plan be identified, requires a pile driving plan that identifies type of method used to install piling. If other than a vibratory hammer is used, that a hydroacoustical monitor would be required. Typically, in the past several projects we've done, the city has seen projects where a vibratory hammer is used. An example of something that would not be that would be an impact hammer. That we haven't seen that in probably at least 5 or 6 years. So in this condition, the applicant is requesting a rewording of the conditions to require that a pile driving plan identifying the type of method used to install pilings be submitted to the city, and that a monitoring plan be submitted if other than the vibratory hammer or jetting is used. In this case, staff disagrees with the applicant's request and is recommending that this condition remain as is. And the reason is it's a little bit of semantics, but essentially the way that staff has proposed planning condition number 9 is that we do want to see a pile driving plan and hydroacoustical monitoring plan, but it's monitoring for purposes of noise, as is written in your resolution, condition number 9, and that the hydroacoustical monitoring ensure that noise levels are reduced to the maximum allowed limits. If the applicant, for whatever reason, would not use the customary vibratory hammer, then we would want to see, in addition to a monitoring plan, we would also want a hydroacoustical monitor. So a little bit of semantics there with the word monitor versus monitoring. Staff does support the recommendation, or the request by the applicant to modify conditions 6 and 8. As I said, I have put that in a revised draft resolution on the dais before you. And as part of that project, in this particular project, and I've outlined this in the staff report, for this project, the applicant has requested, under the plan development regulations in the zoning ordinance, rather than a concept plan approval, which you would see typically on these waterfront projects. The last project that the Planning Commission looked at was on another lease site where the Planning Commission forwarded a favorable recommendation to the City Council for just a concept plan approval. Due to the small scale of this project, the applicant is requesting a combined concept precise plan approval. And so should the Planning Commission choose to approve the project tonight the way that it is, the project would not come back before the Planning Commission. The next step would be the applicant would go before the City Council, presumably with the Planning Commission's favorable recommendation. City Council would hold a public hearing to approve it as a combined concept precise. And then after that, basically would save a hearing. Applicant would obtain their coastal development permit and then come back to staff, and then the bulk of the work would be for staff to enforce conditions and compliance review. So that is how it's been presented in the staff report, and that is the request. And so staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission forward a favorable recommendation to the City Council to approve it as such through the adoption of Planning Commission Resolution 2616, and with the modification of conditions 6 and 8, and then with the new addition of Planning Commission 13 regarding the historical sign. And I've taken the liberty of preparing some draft condition language, if it pleases the Commission, and that would read: an interpretive sign with content relating to the historical nature of Morro Bay shall be submitted for review and approval by the Community Development Director and shall be installed prior to final occupancy of the building permit. With that, I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Are there any questions for staff at this point?
One fairly simple question. That coastal access sign that says open 24 hours, an hour before dawn, what is that? I'm confused by that. What is? It seems to be too inconsistent. What does that mean?
So it's consistent with some other coastal access signs we've seen on the Embarcadero. For example, the Smith Held project, 901 Embarcadero, it's the Held Harbor Center. They have a similar coastal sign that reads that, and it's to allow for greater access, but also during daylight hours, that the docks be open 1 hour before sunrise and 1 hour after.
So is it telling members of the public that they can, this facility, this walkway is open 24 hours, but they can only be there an hour before dawn to an hour after sunset? I'm just trying, I have difficulty understanding that. I have a feeling it will confuse people who are reading the sign.
It's for the dock, so the walkway would be open the whole time. But if in the past,
the gangplank, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
In the past, Coastal Commission has required public access to the floating docks as a form of coastal access, as well as the harbor walk area. So difference.
Okay.
It's for safety.
Well, I'm thinking if I were in the slightest bit confused, other people will be as well. I mean, shouldn't there be something explicit that says walkway open, but a gangway is only available, so that the people know that they could actually go and visit the boardwalk at 10 o'clock at night? I might be discouraged if I saw that sign well, I wouldn't be personally, but other people might.
I don't know how to answer that.
Is it possible even, is that dictated by the Coastal Commission, or can we change that?
No, I mean, it can be changed.
So oftentimes what happens is the access at the prescribed time when they close it, they run a chain across it. And so it shows that you can't go there, but you can still walk behind them. You can still walk along the public access way
Right.
that runs behind the building, parallel to the bay.
So this
So
would-
you would know because there would be a chain.
there.
Yeah.
But this wouldn't be a sign that would be at the start of that stained walkway by the street. This would actually be on the
Which one's the
on the boardwalk, where presumably people have already. Where would that sign be positioned?
Well, yeah, the applicant might be able to address this, and also
Yeah.
their representative based on other projects that she's done. I see the confusion on the sign, and, I mean, we could work with the sign language to kind of address that, to, get rid of that confusion.
To differentiate between the two.
Yeah.
Make it more specific. I
Yeah.
think that's. we could probably-
I think I just have this natural sensitivity, based in Southern California with all these pseudo attempts to restrict what is in fact public access. The other question I had is the sidewalk running from the street to the boardwalk. Are there any standards? And of course, there are standards in terms of construction, but in terms of the look of it, I mean, people will perceive that walkway as part of the sidewalk or they should, that goes along Embarcadero. But I'm not sure that it might look rather unique and not part of it. I'm just trying to encourage people by the similarity of sidewalks to go investigate the boardwalk. So are there any standards as to what color or texture or look to it, or?
There are no standards as far as, engineering standards for sidewalk,
Yeah.
the standard concrete. If the Planning Commission wants to have some other type of design method to delineate that and promote that availability of vertical access, then that is certainly the commission's prerogative. Staff's feedback to the applicant during the processing is the access width is only going to be 4 feet. From the lease line to the building is a little bit more than 4 feet. The building exists, so we can't make the vertical access any wider than what it is. So are there some design methods that we can utilize to make this pop out so that people can see, oh, if I'm walking on Embarcadero Road, I could walk down this pathway and I can connect in with the lateral access. And so that's how the stained concrete approach came about.
I see.
And quite frankly, in talking about this specific issue for this project, we noted that we haven't done this in the past typically, and we thought this might be an example of something we could work through with the applicant and then use it for future projects. So then we have a consistent pattern that's used. So that was some of the concept behind the condition, I guess.
Okay, I see.
Mike?
I just had one question. This isn't trying to complicate things, but it's just a question. Do we ever ask for Braille on any of these signs?
Not to my knowledge, we don't, but that would be an excellent addition.
I would think for the historic sign,
Yeah.
especially.
Yeah.
That might be nice.
Yeah, definitely.
So Cindy, we're supposed to approve a concept and precise plan at this point?
That's what the applicants requested. Planning Commission can choose to approve it that way, or they could choose to approve it as a concept plan. Staff recommended, or is supportive of the combined approach due to the small-scale nature of the project.
Do we have any color boards? Do we have any material lists? Do we have any of things, the lighting fixtures, the location of the trash trash bins, any of the street furniture. I don't see any of that here on this plan that we would normally see on a precise plan.
Right. They have not submitted that, no.
Okay. Another question is on our Harborfront Master Plan. What is the percentage of lateral frontage areas that's required for a view corridor?
So on lease sites 50 feet or wider, the view corridor is 30% of the lease site width. This having an existing hotel that predates the waterfront master plan, obviously cannot comply with that minimum 30% lease width.
Okay, so we would need 18 feet, approximately, maybe a little bit more. We have a side yard there that looked like it was added on to after the initial construction. Do we have an existing, or do we have a existing plan from the building, from the original building permit that we can correlate to this, to what was there and what's been added on afterwards?
The Planning Commission, there are plans in the files from 1993 when they did the second-story addition.
Okay. And what is allowed in a view corridor as far as fencing, cross-fencing, temporary storage facilities?
Pretty much almost nothing, unless it's under 42 inches in height.
Okay.
30.
30 inches? Oh, it's 30.
30.
Oh, sorry, 30. I don't know why I thought 42.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I have none at this time, so we will open the public comment period, and typically we will invite the applicant or applicant's representative to speak first, so please come forward, and love to hear from you.
Good evening, Chair Teft and Commissioners. My name is Kathy Novak, and I'm here this evening representing the applicant for the 561 Embarcadero Road project, known as the Gray's Inn. Before I begin, I'd like to thank staff for their time and assistance with this project and their recommendation for approval. This project is relatively simple, and staff has provided a detailed project overview, so I will be brief with my comments on focus on a few items that may not be clear in the plans, as well as a little bit of a background on this site. Todd and Tamara Baston purchased this lease site from the Grays a couple of years ago when they decided to retire from running the inn and the gallery. When the Bastons purchased this lease site, they provided a proposal to the council for a redevelopment project in exchange for a new lease. This particular lease is one of the few remaining Pipkin leases that expires in 2018. The proposal at the time presented to council consisted of providing an 8-foot wide street-side sidewalk and an 8 to 10-foot lateral access boardwalk on the water side to connect with the building adjoining on the north of Salt Building and the south of the Kayak Horizons, enhancing the view corridor between the inn and the Kayak Horizons, maintenance of the existing slips, and additional ADA compliance on the site. In keeping with the proposal presented to council, this proposed project includes a new harbor walk that is 8 to 10 feet wide and will connect to the Salt Building on the north side and provide a future connection on the south for Kayak Horizons. The proposal additionally includes an 8-foot sidewalk along the Embarcadero, and improved vertical access to the harbor walk, new and repaired pilings, and building facade improvements. As staff has noted, the new harbor walk will be 10 feet wide, with the exception where the existing gangway is located. In this small area, the harbor walk will be 8 feet wide to accommodate the gangway. We spent considerable amount of time with staff discussing the reduction and the problems associated with relocating or revising the gangway in order to provide a 10-foot harbor walk. We would like to thank staff for their understanding of this issue and for their recommendation to keep the configuration in its present form. I won't go into any further details, but if the Commission would like some more background or has questions, I'd be happy to answer any. The project architect is also here to answer any technical questions on that, too. On the one other item I'd like to point out to the Commission is a 7-foot by 11-foot extension of the harbor walk on the north side. When the Salt Building project was approved and constructed, the project was required to provide an ADA access through the site and to the harbor walk. To facilitate this, an ADA lift was installed. This lift is located just north of the proposed harbor walk on the Salt Building side. Since the ADA lift cannot be relocated, the proposed Gray's Inn Harbor Walk will extend to the west and then to the north to provide a clear path around the lift. I would also like to mention that when the Salt Building Harbor Walk was constructed, that it was constructed approximately 2 feet short of the lease line. So this project is proposing to construct the additional 2 feet on the Salt Building lease site in order to make this connection. Next, the project incorporates an enhanced vertical access from the Embarcadero to the Harbor Walk. This area will be reconstructed with a ramp to provide ADA access, as well as open the visual corridor by removing the existing tool shed and redesigning the landscaping that blocks the view currently. Next, and since this request to approve both concept and precise plans, the sign program has been included with this submittal. The proposal includes a typical Harbor Walk signs and other coastal access signs that have been used by all other projects on the waterfront for continuity. There will be one interpretive panel that will be installed on the Harbor Walk, but I do not have the graphic for this sign currently. I've been working with the Morro Bay Historical Society to develop interpretive panels along the waterfront as a part of their Hidden History project. The Historical Society is working on these signs around the waterfront and downtown. As we have projects come up, the Historical Society is trying to find photographs and history information that is closely related to the site area as possible to provide this connection. The Hidden History project is just getting underway, so we don't have any specific details for this time for this particular location. As staff has recommended, a condition of approval that will be finalized and submitted to the city is fine with us, and hopefully the commission will understand that. Next, the building facade improvements and repairs will be done as the last phase to finish off this proposal. The last item I'd like to mention is the language for Planning Commission number 9. I believe that staff and I are on the same page for the intent of the condition, which is to say if you're using a vibratory hammer or jetting, you will not be required to do this hydroacoustical monitoring plan with a monitor. However, if you do conventional trial driving, you'll need to do this. I told staff the only reason I'm asking for the amendment is to provide clarity to this language. We have all seen that over time when people change and come back with projects a couple of years later, it's not easy to understand what the condition really meant. I'm just asking respectfully that the text be changed as I presented so that it is clear from the beginning of the condition and not mixed in the middle or added to the end and what the intent needs to be done. In conclusion, this project will provide another segment to the city's long-term goal of having a bayside lateral walkway as well as other benefits to the lease site. The Bastons have been working hard to carry on the tradition of the unique and comfortable Gray's Inn that so many visitors have enjoyed over the years. So on behalf of the Bastons, we would respectfully ask the Commission's favorable recommendation for approval as presented. I'd like to address a couple of things that came up in the interim when there was with staff. The coastal access signs with the hours, I think the easy solution to do that is just to insert the words docks open 1 hour before sunset, blah, 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 and I think that would clear it up because it does say public boardwalk at the top, and we can easily just add docks open in that sign and provide the clarity. As far as the precise plan, we did give the city a color board, a material board, and et cetera. I'm not sure exactly what happened with it, but we did that early on, and you have it. As far as the trash cans, if you look on your site plans, on the northeast corner of the Harbor Walk is the trash can recycle bin location. We do have all the signs proposed for the project located on the things. There's no additional lighting that's being necessary, so I believe that you have all the components of the precise plan that you need, minus the color board, which I don't have a copy with me, but we had given to staff before. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Like I say, the project architect is here as well, and we hope for your approval this evening. Thank you.
Hi, Gene Dowdy, architect for the project. Concerning the view shed of the existing buildings there, I was the original architect, or not the original architect, but the architect for the addition to the building. And originally it was a one-story building, and then we added the second story, and we purposely moved the second story back to offset and created more view shed for the building. We put in slope roofs. This is trying to create as much view corridor as we possibly could I was on the Waterfront Master Plan Guidelines Committee when we designed these things, and so we were trying to do what we could on that aspect on the thing. And then on to condition number 9, with the acoustical monitoring device that you guys, as Cindy has asked to be included. I kind of feel like it's just an unnecessary requirement. I've probably put in 300 or 400 pilings in the bay, and there used to be a lot of hammering pilings, of jetted in pilings. Just recently, I did special observation on probably 20 vibratory pilings put in the bay, just last couple of weeks. You can stand virtually right next to the piling, and there's not any really noise. These are, and that's about it. And most of that comes from the machine, the hydraulic motor that's up on the barge there. But the actual piling itself and the water that ripples around the piling is maybe no more than just this much. It's just pretty small. It's not a real damaging machine. It's probably the best way to put pilings in. I mean, you put them in, you bring them in, put them back down. You don't quite like exactly where you are. You pull it up and put it back in again. And it's pretty cool. I mean, it's just like stamping your feet in the wet sand. So I don't really think you need to add an additional monitor to watch that. We've already got the eelgrass monitor. We've got special inspector on the job site. One other person just gonna add more cost, and probably I don't feel necessary on this particular issue. Any questions? Glad to answer them.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anyone else? Are there any, before we close public comment, are there any questions for the applicant or the architect or?
Gene, seeing as we don't have the color board here, or I haven't seen it, what are the finished materials you're getting that are going to be used on site? And what are the colors, and what's the roofing, what's the exposed lighting?
Because it's grays in, you're going to probably see a lot of gray. We talked about hardy plank and probably be a gray or an off gray color for the new siding on phase 3. Stained concrete, we talked about maybe a light brown color, going to act like sand or something like that. You know, unless you guys want to go with blue or green or something. We haven't really discussed that too into depth. As far as the walkway, it's going to be called dock cider. It's a gray material. And then, of course, the eelgrass grading is a gray color also. So, and then probably the glulam beams that are going out holding that, we're probably going to be used the Alaskan yellow cedar. I really like that. It's not a treated wood, but it's impervious to all the rot and stuff. So I like that color. We see that down at the Harbor Center now. So.
What about lighting on the docks? I didn't see anything specified here. Are you going to have pedestals for electrical, or what's?
Yes, it'll be the low lighting. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's what we've used on Morro Bay Landing. It's already spec'd out on there somewhere. So.
And then on the exterior lighting for the building, are typically it's required that they be downlit without
down lighting,
shielded.
low small aluminum. I'd have to look at the plans and figure out what I drew on them. But
Okay. Because those are the things we normally see on a precise plan. That's what worries me about doing a concept/precise plan without.
I can understand your concern. I know that there was a material board submitted, and there was a lighting plan submitted at some time. So
Okay.
I can't answer that if I don't have
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Sure.
I think this is a question for Gene. Sorry about that.
You know, I used to get really nervous coming up here, but not anymore. So
Don't be when it comes to my questions.
I sit up there sometimes. You know.
I imagine gang planks attached to a deck of some sort of for
A pin
ease of
connection, yes.
rolling carts and things like that. Do they ever get attached to a series of steps, which then are then attached to a platform, as in, say in this case, gangplank and 2 or 3 steps, and then the walkway? Does that create a
I've never
terrible-
seen a gangway attached to steps, but of course the steps would have to go back and forth, so it'd have to be on wheels also. Because as it's going up and down, it's also rotating back and forth. It's like a,
right? Well,
it's
okay,
swinging, you know.
that probably explains. I guess what I was thinking is, if there was some way to maintain this 10-foot thoroughfare with several steps, and then the gangplank attaching to that. But in your opinion, that really wouldn't be, aside from people with disabilities and the like.
Oh, okay. Are you talking about steps on the uphill end or the downhill?
Here's the boardwalk.
Right.
And then to the west of it would be 2 or 3 steps, and then the gangplank would attach to that. Would that work?
Well, it might work. It's just harder to carry things up and down steps. and
I
things.
thought of that, and then I'm thinking of the nature of the things that are moored there. It's, and then perhaps you could even have a portable ramp to cover the steps and the odd occasion that's something. I'm not really advocating. I've just really sort of wondered if it
One
was.
of the things an engineer can always do is just throw money at it. So
Yeah.
the more money you throw at it, eventually you'll solve that problem. So
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking that might be a lower cost solution than. Okay. There was one other question. It was with respect to the follow-up. This, Jane, I think you can sit down. This is for the lady who was. I'm sorry.
Kathy.
Kathy.
Okay, all yours, Kathy.
Thank you, Gene. With respect to the second and third year follow-up of the condition of the eelgrass, I believe you in the document that it really isn't necessary because it's out of the eelgrass bed. Is that essentially your position?
Right now it is. So the way that what I was trying to do with this condition is to just make it short and sweet and make sure that we're consistent with the Kemp. If we find that in a pre-construction survey that's going to be done 60 days prior to construction, that a new eelgrass bed has just all of a sudden grown in that particular area, it may be, the Army Corps would typically write a condition for our Army Corps permit that says you do the pre-construction, you do the post-construction, and if impacts were detected or if there was something that came out of the pre-construction survey that were required annual surveys after the first post-construction survey, then we would do them. What I was trying to work with Cindy on is let's not actually require that there would be actually what they would call 3 post-construction surveys. First one being 30 days after, and then 2 after that annually. Instead of writing a mandatory condition that there'll be the 2 annual surveys thereafter, if there's no need to do those 2 annual surveys, then let's not make it mandatory in these conditions. But according to the Kemp, if we find that it is necessary to have those annual surveys, we will have to do them by the federal regulations, if that makes sense. So give us the flexibility, say, meet the federal regulations, which say post-construction, and if you have to do the 2 annuals, then you do them, rather than if we don't have to do the 2 annuals, let's not have mandatory condition in the city permit that says we have to do it, and there's nothing there to really look. I mean, if there's absolutely no eelgrass on the site when we do the pre-construction survey, then there's no reason to mandatorily make somebody do 2 annual surveys after when there's no eelgrass there.
Right.
Do I make sense? I mean, it's kind of a
Yeah.
hard, difficult thing to describe, but I'm just saying, can we be consistent with the Kemp, the federal policies, which would be a requirement we do it if there is eelgrass there that might be impacted?
Okay. Thank you.
Kathy, I'm sorry. Get you on roller skates here or something. What is the situation for the Morro Bay Eelgrass Bank or communal bank for eelgrass restoration area. I know there was some action on that at one point.
Right, they've been doing it. The problem is that there's a lot of agency. We've got, the city's going to be involved, we've got the Coastal Commission, you've got National Marine Fisheries Service, you've got California Fish and Wildlife, and you've got on and on and on, all these agencies that have to buy into that kind of a program. And so everybody's been trying over the years to get this together to do something. Fortunately, in the KIMP, there is a section that talks about mitigations and the ratios for mitigating things, and there's also another section that talks about mitigation banks and in lieu payments. So there actually is a mechanism in the federal policy now that if they want to go that direction and create a bank or an in lieu fee system, once all agencies can get together and figure it out, then you can. Right now, we just don't have that. So that's been another struggle with some of these smaller projects that have, just a little couple of inches of inches of eelgrass, and then you're trying to meet these policies and mitigations. It's not necessarily the 1.2 to 1 mitigation on site. It just makes it very problematic. And in certain areas, especially along our waterfront, with these small disconnected patches, would it be better served to be able to have mitigation monies? And the other struggle that they're trying to do too is that if they do this in lieu fee program, they really need to be able to allocate money toward research, and because you can't use the money toward research now. So it would be helpful if they continue that. So hopefully in the next couple of years, some of this more will get fleshed out, and we'll have a better system where people can actually do something and monies can actually go places where it would actually do some good.
Yeah, this seems like a perfect case study for why that is necessary. You have two eelgrass locations that are minimum. You might have one, I think it was 2 or 3 plants, and you have to have 5-meter radius around each of those plants.
Right,
So-
and in the first survey that was done on this property, there was actually one little tiny eelgrass patch in between, about midway in the middle of the project. And then when they went out a second time on the survey, that one was gone. So it's a real transient in nature, and it's just because of the area, and it's tough. There's a gentleman, Brian Mukes, that works for National Marine Fisheries Service that we communicate, and he's in charge of all these eelgrassing. So a lot of times when I start off these projects to begin with, I will send Brian a note and ask for some guidance, and he has been helpful on some of the other projects we've worked on to try to guide everybody how the feds are thinking about dealing with this so that we can answer these questions too.
Yeah, it's just a personal comment. We have such a problem maintaining the eelgrass, and I seem to find a lot of it in my intake strainer. So it's been kind of crazy that all the eelgrass was really dying in the back bay, and everybody was saying, where is it going? But all the projects that we've been working on the Embarcadero the eelgrass has been going crazy. When you look down at Morro Bay Landing and Gafco and Harbor Hut, the amount of eelgrass that when we first did the first eelgrass survey back in 2004 or 2005 for that project, and you look at the amount of eelgrass, and you go down and look at the eelgrass today, it's huge down there today in comparison to back then. So why is this one all of a sudden huge, and everything seems to be just upside down? So yeah. I can't answer that question, but it's crazy. Thanks.
I want to really quickly follow up on the eelgrass issue. I'm on the ad hoc committee for the waterfront for the eelgrass committee. Some of the projects we're seeing down there on the Embarcadero have an increase of 600-fold in eelgrass, just as the last eelgrass report. And then Neil was telling me, who has the oyster company in the back there, that he's seeing new sprouts of eelgrass growing up throughout the whole back bay, which is really good news. So,
Gene, before you sit down, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Just to get things straight in my mind. You mentioned what the decking material was going to be for the
I believe it's called dock
lateral
cider.
access.
I believe it's called dock cider.
Dock cider?
Dock cider.
And that's composite material?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's similar to Trex, that kind of, yeah.
Yes.
So, okay. And then one of the items here on the plans is repair decks. Does that include replacing the surface material of the decks?
That's the upper decks for on the structure itself, the motel.
The upper decks, right?
Yes, some of those decks it's getting time to do some repair work, and they will probably be a Trex material.
So are you going to replace all the wood, all the surface wood on the decks, or?
In 5 years from now, probably yes. Yeah, I mean, we're talking at phase 3.
Pardon?
We're talking about phase 3
Right,
construction.
phase 3.
I'm going to say you're going to replace the decks, all the decks.
Okay, so is that going to then match the material on the Harbor Walk, or is it going to be a different
It's pretty
color?
close. The Trex deck is a gray material with a wood grain in it. The Docksider decking material that we'll use on the Harbor Walk is gray with a wood grain material also. Both composite materials. One's just thicker and stronger.
And what about the deck railings? Are those going to be replaced, changed, modified?
I think that we're going to be putting in on the upper deck of the motels. That's just a handrail over the top of the roofing there. That'll probably be the same. But the railing in front of the new Harbor Walk and the lower deck, we'll probably put in a glazing of some kind right there, a tinted glazing with a bird stripe. I believe that's called out on the plans.
Maybe. I may have missed it. It's possible. It says roof shingle repair, so I assume you're not going to change the roofing material. That's just going to be replacing shingles where necessary.
Yeah, the roof is probably 15 years old or something like that, maybe even 20. So at some point we're going to re-roof the material. And it'll probably be a gray color, a shade of gray.
And no lighting fixtures are going to be changed, going to be replaced.
Not that I know of. I think the only lighting fixtures I'm aware of is going to be down on the floating docks, and those are Eaton Lighthouse pedestals, if I remember right. Okay. Yes. Initially, when we did the design on Gray's Inn, we wanted to make those kind of like pyramids or hip roofs, true hip roofs there, and we were going to put a little glass peak on the top there, and there was going to be a skylight, and we were going to use different colored hips, different colors. One would be blue, one would be green, and then the white would be like the tips of the ocean of a wave. And we were going to do that on the whole Embarcadero, that whole block. So you'd see a whole series of waves on the tops of the roofs there. But that's just my architectural fantasy there.
Okay, I guess that's all the questions I have at the moment. Michael?
Gene, just so people understand, that 8-foot deck is the material you're talking about, but the 2-foot section on each side of the gangplank is actually the open mesh, steel mesh,
Yes.
as well as the joint between the salt
Yes.
deck and this one. That's
Yes.
also the open
Yes.
steel. Okay. And I guess the other question I have is, we don't ever light the 24-hour deck itself, access?
Do you mean the sign? We don't light the sign?
No, the access itself. Like if we have this swath going down the side now, that's public access, we don't have to light that walkway?
I believe that we've had lighting on public access, downward pedestal, like
Low.
waist high.
Go
Yes.
The coastal commission typically doesn't like lights out there just because of it going down into the bay and things like that. So I don't recollect a project that I've ever been involved with that we've proposed lighting on the Harbor Walk. Usually the Harbor Walk gets lit up enough with the surrounding buildings with lights and things like that on it. But
Yeah, I
it's a
didn't look
concern.
at I didn't look at the waterfront plan to see if we had anything like that in there. Because some of those lights that are down low, they spill out sideways. They don't necessarily spill down so much or up at all. But I was just wondering, just because if we don't have any, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't recall anywhere where we have anything like that. I mean, I'm trying to think, and most of the lighting comes, as Kathy said, off the buildings that are existing there when you see them. I mean, when it's dark, they don't have lights in those locations. I mean, that's kind of my experience walking along the bay side.
This little slot is
Yeah,
a
there's-
little different because it's only 4 feet wide, and well, it's got the planter and things opened up. There might be some spill around, but it's kind of a slot. Could be kind of not inviting for 24-hour access.
Other questions?
Quick clarification, are you talking about the vertical access going to the Harbor Walk for the lighting? No, okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the actual Harbor Walk itself.
Well, I was actually wondering about the whole access path, both down to the walkway and then the boardwalk itself.
I think the 4-foot vertical access would be easier to put some low lighting or something, around that area. There is some landscaping right by the stairs. Maybe something can go down there. But the actual Harbor Walk itself, I don't believe that the Coastal Commission would be too supportive of that, just because the spillover going down into the bay, and because I just have a problem even with dock lights and things like that. When we go up to the Coastal Commission, they're concerned about that and putting them on timers or what do I want to say? Auto, so that it goes off when nobody's there. So it seems to be real problematic up there. But the vertical pathway, if I'm sure that Gene could probably figure something out for you.
Question? Other questions? None? Okay, then we will close public comment, bring it back to the commission. Thoughts? Joe?
Well, I'll go to the heart of the matter. The 2-foot intrusion into the boardwalk, it doesn't seem too onerous to me in view of the amount of foot traffic you'd expect to have at any given moment. In terms of the aesthetics, I'm not too bothered by it. I'm assuming there might be some sort of a railing that follows the gangplank up that 2-foot intrusion. And if you found that obnoxious, you could probably put a planter and a potted plant or even a bench or something like that there. So I guess I'm not bothered by that. If that sort of interruption in the 10-foot width is a problem, maybe we could investigate the question I was asking about doing some kind of, step down to the gangplank. But I sympathize with the applicant in terms of the onus of that sizable additional expense to just create just that consistency along the boardwalk. And every time I have to wrestle with one of these decisions, I think about in terms of precedent and all that. But I think if we're faced with a similar situation, there are numerous ways to sort of distinguish this from something that might come in the future, and so we could still preserve, for the most part, our 10-foot walkways. But as I alluded to earlier, I am concerned about allowing the members of the public to easily discover that this exists and that it be an inviting path. And I know everybody wants that. We just have to sort of devise the design so that it is immediately visible to people and inviting, and certainly the low-level lighting, so it's, if they want to take some sort of romantic walk along the harbor walk, they aren't in any way bothered by the shadows and the approach to the water and things like that. Those are my thoughts, and in terms of the provisions for protecting the eelgrass and the Community Development Office's recommendations, I feel satisfied with following those. Those are my thoughts.
Jerry?
Okay, I've got a couple concerns with the project. I really like the building, and Gene, what you did there on that second-story addition, I think was a great addition. I like the delineation and the articulation of the building, and I think the project itself is going to be fine. But I do have concerns about the view corridor. it seems to me that this was another problem of accretion that happens through the years where something, this was designated or is the view corridor per se, whether it was designated as such or not. It is the view corridor, and then things accrete there, such as there's some existing storage sheds there up against the building. There's the fence lines, the cross fences that go across there, and then there's also the parking space that intrudes upon that. And even if you look on the east elevation, the view corridor is labeled from the property line to the building as the existing view corridor. And I know that's just labeling, but I think that's probably one of the most important parts of this project is to restore that view corridor as a view corridor. So I would be looking for a condition to remove those structures that are in the view corridor. Like our present master plan calls for 18 feet. This is, we're talking about 8 feet there is the only
Doesn't the
thing.
the project does that?
Well, it still shows,
They're removing the shed thing.
they're removing the tool shed.
And they're restriping the parking lot to move it over so your walkway goes
Right.
straight from the street back.
So the 4 feet, not the 8 feet or so.
Correct, because that would
And
remove a
then-
parking space.
But it still shows the gate on the plot plan and then the line there, which I'm assuming is a fence line on both front and back of the buildings.
If I can add in, there's an existing chain link fence, which is clearly higher than 30 inches, and there's
Right.
existing vegetation, which is higher than 30 inches. There's a storage cabinet, there's a trash container, there's some furniture, and it needs to be a condition that be removed.
Yeah, well,
And be kept away.
Yeah, okay, so,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to make it explicit that we could do that, that's part of the project, though, I mean, even the
Okay.
description, I think
Okay,
that
yeah.
Kathy gave. Yeah.
It didn't show, or I didn't see anything explicit saying that was going to be a requirement.
We can make that
Okay.
explicit, that's not a problem, I don't think.
Okay. As far as the harbor walk, I don't have a problem with the 2-foot incursion. Those ramps get awfully steep at low tide, especially at minus tides. So the only thing I would recommend is on that ramp is that, I think the new ADA requirement on where it has the fine grain aggregate on that ramp is actually slicker than almost anything else. So you actually slide on it. So just if there's anything you can do to make that ramp, better footing, that would be helpful, especially on the low tide situation. The other thing that I just have a problem with is we have verbal, and I trust Gene, but we also don't have anything specific as far as the color board, as far as a list of materials of what the siding's going to be in 3 to 5 years. And when they do the second and third phase, we don't have anything listed in this plan stating what the project is going to look like finally. So,
Commissioner Lura, as the conversation has been unfolding, I vaguely remember that I may have gotten a hard copy color board. And
sorry.
I deeply apologize during the course of the processing. It just, I think, was a file management error and did not get transferred into the PC staff report. So as Gene was talking and he was describing the materials, that started coming back to me. So I do apologize that
Okay.
that was not made available in your packet.
Okay, how do we rectify that now so we don't hold up the project, but we actually have a precise plan?
There are several choices. You can either simply approve it as a concept plan and make that recommendation to council. You can request that we bring that to you at a future meeting as on consent or something along those lines for you to look at if you want to see it. We know that we have it now. That's good. If you have concerns about what the description was that was provided by Gene, then certainly maybe you want to see it. If you're okay with that, we'll verify that that's what's reflected on there, as per what Gene indicated, and we'll make sure that's what comes forward. So that's kind of a decision for the commission. How comfortable are you, sort of delegating that component of it to staff? Or if you really want to see it, we can bring it back as a consent, that piece of it, just that color board, and show it to you. Sort of up to you.
Okay, preferably, I would like to see it on the plans, on the approved plans, so, but, as an addendum to the report too, as a condition, that would probably be sufficient. It just, I'll go along with what we think, but I think we need to have that specified.
Well, I think what we'll do is, if we have it, then we'll stamp it like we stamp the plans, and
Right.
that'll be approved along with the rest of the plans.
And also, when this goes to city council, we could request that the applicant add that as a plan sheet page, so that it's part of the paper submittal, as opposed to a rigid board with the color and the material samples.
That's a good point.
Okay, and then the third thing is on connectivity of the Harbor Walk to the kayak horizon site. Do we have, they're first in line, they got theirs, essentially they got theirs in. Will that be easy to connect up with the next lease site over? As far as elevation, and then the connection to the street end at, what's the name of that street? Is that Anchor Street?
I'm terrible with street names.
So are you asking whether we've evaluated that?
Yes,
We've not.
okay.
We are globally evaluating this as part of the Downtown Waterfront Strategic Plan.
Okay.
So like all of these lease sites and how you connect them, we're evaluating them as part of that. We certainly can, if you want to add a condition to this, do that, and we'll bring the results of that condition and our analysis forward to council as to what we found. I mean, we've gone out there and looked at it. When the application was first submitted, we went and walked the site, both Cindy and I did. So we've looked at it, but I mean, we haven't had any evaluation done as far as elevations and those types of things.
Just seeing it, walking the site and being there at times, it seems like the street end is several feet higher than the proposed boardwalk, the harbor walk.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that might be valuable to know now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know.
Well, so you can add that as a condition, and we'll take a look at it, and then we'll bring our findings forward to council if you'd like. So at least it gets answered, and it gets answered in public form as part of the approval process.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Michael?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Lohr. I think this is the Embarcadero, and to not have specific plan information to make a decision on is really unfortunate. I appreciate everything that's being done, though. This is a really small project with a really high cost, I'm sure, associated with it, and I appreciate your investing in Morro Bay. But I do think because it's got these linkages and things like that, the council at least needs to know that we knew enough to suggest that you verify some of these things before they have the capacity. I also think if I was an adjacent owner or near adjacent owner, I'd want to see what my neighbor was doing with their property if it's something that has discretion, so that I think it's a property right of the adjacent property owner, or not owners, but renters, to understand what the ramifications were. I just want the record to show I have a absolute distasteful dislike of blue. I don't want to see anything blue. I don't want to see blue stained, concrete. If the signs have to be blue, that's all right. But I think it's one of those things. I think when we talked about the project a few weeks ago, and we talked about what's the working waterfront image, and we were talking about the different kinds of images that we saw in the work that was proposed. This is a real, gosh, it's 2 feet, that's a different material because of this. It's reacting to things that are real here. And I think it's fantastic we have all these anomalies. I do think the deck discussion is fascinating because it does start to suggest when you come off the street, you might be a hair higher, and then you start to look at above the public space that moves across. Now, some renters, long-term leaseholders might want to adjust that so that they're planar. But I think it's also an advantage to have something that's semi-private to these hotel rooms, with the public being a little bit lower. I don't have a problem with that. But long-term, you want to see how that connectivity actually works. Because some of these images where you're looking down toward the yacht club and things, it's very interesting to see how those things are going to mesh at some point. But I'm fine with all the other pieces. I'm fine with the staff's reaction to the proposed changes.
Well, I have to echo the same discomfort that I'm hearing from everyone else about the fact that we don't really know what we're proposing. And I think personally, my preference would be to review it at this level before we send it to council. But I don't know how everyone else feels on that. But we have very little information about Phase 3 whatsoever. I mean, even the answers to the questions are, well, probably this, well, most likely that, and that's not a precise plan. So I really have a great deal of unease about the uncertainty there. I agree with very much with Jerry regarding the view corridor. It really needs to be a view corridor, which means that the obstructions there need to be removed. I will point out, and I'm honestly not advocating this, but I'm pointing it out as a piece of information. If we were absolutely intent on having the 10-foot width go the entire way, probably the most economical way to accomplish that would be to shorten the existing wood deck. It's cantilevered out from its main supports anyway, so it would, kind of just be a matter of cutting a couple of feet off of it. I'm not, like I say, I'm not advocating that. I'm simply saying that is an option that doesn't seem to have been discussed, that doesn't seem to have been presented to Coastal Commission or here. Probably the biggest problem I have with what we're looking at now, okay, is the parking situation. Because the northernmost parking space has a pole in front of it, and the actual width of that parking space from the pole to the striping is 6 feet, 10.5 inches. That's not a parking space. And what I see happening then, the way I see that, obviously, whoever pulls into that space is going to pull in further south than what the striping would indicate, which means that the next car is going to be further south, which means that the third car is going to be in this public access corridor. So I think what we have here is something that's drawn on paper that's not going to work in reality. I think that public access way would have to be protected somehow. It would have to have a wall along it. It would have to have a curb and a raised sidewalk that's at a different level than the asphalt, because otherwise it's not going to exist. It's going to be automobile parking. Currently, the cars park pretty much all the way to the fence here, and I don't see how that can change. There's no more space there unless that pole is removed. That's the only way I can see that this plan is going to work. I just think that the idea that we have 3 parking spaces left there after taking 4 feet away is fiction. I don't see that being something that works on the ground. So those are basically my issues. The biggest issue being this whole arrangement in front. This distance, yeah, this right here. It's a sign.
Wasn't that sign meant to be removed? Wasn't that a condition that,
It hasn't been, but I mean, I don't, it could be, I guess.
does that even meet our sign ordinance? That a post sign, pedestal?
The pole sign and the monument sign
Yeah.
out front were part of the 1993 conditional use permit approval.
Yeah.
The only changes to signage that they're proposing is the sign on the bay side, where they'll remove the word motel.
But but what they're changing, and the relevance of it is they're changing the location of the parking spaces so that the sign, which now is outside of the parking spaces, is obstructing one of the proposed parking spaces. That's the nexus.
So, agreed. That's a good one. And I would recommend that you open it back up for the applicant to come back up and see what the response to that would be to resolve that issue. I think it'd be worthwhile for the planning commission to hear that, and if they don't have a prepared response at this point, I would recommend that you continue the item to the next meeting so that they had time to put something together for that. Or really probably the second meeting in January, not the next meeting.
I don't think the space is there, as it's drawn.
Good catch.
Hi. I would suggest that we just go out and I'll take a true measurement with a tape measure, and then we'll know what we've got. And that's probably the simplest way to determine whether I've got a line drawn in the wrong location or the sign poles in the wrong location. That to me makes the simplest solution, and we can come back with a color board at that time. If you guys have any problem with that, it seems to solve most questions.
No, because I'm just working off your plans here.
Yeah, yeah, I
If
understand.
if there's something shifted,
Things
then
happen. Yeah.
But Gene, my comment does still stand that there needs to be more separation than just a change in texture between the parking area and the sidewalk area. I'm not here to dictate what that is, but
The handicap ramp to meet the ADA requirements is going to start basically at the 8-foot wide sidewalk, and then it'll continue on down. So there will be a separation in height, and we'll probably have to put a curb right there of some kind, or a small fence. So,
something like that.
yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I think we're getting to the point where we're saying, we have a couple of unresolved issues here, and I think the applicants are agreeing that we have a couple of unresolved issues, and I think we have solutions available to us, a tape measure and a color board. So maybe our best solution would be simply to continue this, and then we can maybe wrap up the whole precise plan, concept plan, and kind of package it better for the council.
It seems reasonable, given where we're at right now. That would be our recommendation as well. We're probably looking at continuing it to what is the 17th?
Let me just, before we move forward, let me just open it up to ask if the applicants have any other comments they'd like to make or any reaction to that course of action.
No, I think we're fine. We got some good discussion from you this evening, and so we're prepared now to go back and look at a couple things more and be able to give you some maybe follow-up that might be helpful as well. So it's fine with us.
Perfect. And
So we'd be looking at a continuance to the 17th, not the 3rd, because we won't have time. One, it doesn't give us much time to put this together. We have the holiday. That's a problem. And so getting this...
you want to celebrate Christmas? Come on.
Yeah, so I would recommend that it be the 17th. And also, it's going to be a fairly long meeting on the 3rd with Panorama. So
Right.
And this would probably be after that, so put them way late anyway. So yeah.
We have a pretty big issue on the 17th too, don't we?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the RVs and trailers, but this would come first. So we get this through and done. It's a continued item. We'll take them first. We don't want to punish them.
Right. Maybe we could make sure we put them on the agenda first. So we have a motion then to continue this to our January 17th meeting?
I'll move that we continue this to January 17th, or do we want to do a date uncertain? Are they going to be comfortable
You good with the 17th? Yeah.
Okay, great. To January 17th meeting?
I'll second.
So we have a motion to continue to January 17th, and we have a second. And
Okay, on discussion, I'm sorry, had jumped
Discussion,
ahead. Do we need to go over the discussion items, or do we need to go over the items that we would like to have addressed, or do we?
why don't
you
we have,
think that
why don't we have staff give us their feedback, and then we can see if they've missed anything or if we have anything to add.
So the two big items would be the color board and any other items that precise plan submittal checklist requires. And then more detailed measurements of that pole sign. The two big items.
We'll probably bring back a condition that deals with the corridor maintenance. It actually gives a little time, because I was a little concerned about a portion of that walkway actually wraps you around to the private deck.
Yes.
And so we need to take a look at what that might look like, removing all of the fencing to that point, because they probably don't want to leave that open. There needs to be they probably want some sort of something there to delineate that you're not supposed to go there if you're the public.
Right.
So I want to work through that.
Just
with
needs to
them.
be under 30, it can be there, it just needs to be under 30 inches.
But also on that side, there weren't any openings, wasn't any access to that deck from the building, and it was the only access that I saw was from the back deck around to it. So that whole deck could basically be removed and not really affect the enjoyment of that back deck from my perusal walking through that.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Do you mean the side deck?
The side
The
deck,
side deck, yeah.
yeah. So that side deck that's in the view corridor that has the fencing on, the cross fence?
Yeah, we would be moving whatever that gate is
Right.
further toward the bay.
Right.
And then you would, on the left side, you would go down to the public access way, and on the right side, you would go into the private deck that's there.
Yeah.
With probably some sort of gate to tell you not to go there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's 30 inches or something along those lines.
And then also the connectivity potential for the Harbor Walk all the way to the street end.
Okay, yeah, we'll look at that.
I have one question. Since we seem to be talking about it, with respect to this gradual build-out of the boardwalk across the Embarcadero, aside from the Coastal Commission's determination of 10 feet and the Morro Bay plan of 8 feet, are there other specific guidelines as to what this boardwalk should look like? Or, because there's going to be considerable disparity between property and property, and that individuality may be a good thing.
There is considerable variation in material types throughout there because it's not called out.
So we've never really talked about that.
The downtown waterfront strategic plan is going to go there. So,
Okay.
in fact, probably something you'll be seeing potentially in a joint session with the city council in January, if not then February.
But this will. Okay, fine.
Part of the differences have been due to the fact that Coastal Commission requirements have varied from time to time. That sometimes light transmitting material is okay, sometimes it's not okay. Sometimes, it's the rules have changed from time to time.
There's a lot of hands that kind of go into that mixing bowl and a lot of reasons why things look the way that they do and why it's different from project to project.
Well, I certainly think that uniformity probably isn't the best idea along this boardwalk. But I was just wondering if there were some basic guidelines in terms of kinds of materials and et cetera. That's it.
But this might be an instance where we could actually specify a standard for the vertical access, texture on the concrete that could then be the standard so that people would see that and then actually say, okay, well, this is okay to walk on. So Gene, you get your chance of putting your stamp on this.
Yeah, recognizing that some of the vertical access will continue to be public sidewalk. Right. Yeah, so. Any further discussion? If not, could we have a roll call?
Commissioner Lucas.
Aye.
Commissioner Luer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ingraffia.
Aye.
Chairperson Teft.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0 to continue to January 17th, 2017. Thanks.
Thank you.
Could I just ask a quick favor? The condition, the last condition, the modification about the hydroacoustical monitoring, nobody mentioned any kind about that. And I was just kind
You're
of
right.
curious about I was trying to get your attention before you took
I'm
the motion,
sorry.
so.
Can we reopen that for comments on, can we reopen the item for comments on that?
You're the chair.
Yes,
you
are we
can-
allowed to?
Yes, you can yes, you can open it back up.
Okay, does anyone object if we reopen it for that?
No.
So, any thoughts?
Well, I think testimony here and from the best practices and the best machine available, I think it's going to make it a moot point. You know, if it's so I don't really see what the difference is if they use a vibratory placing mechanism, then that condition isn't required.
Right, but I think honestly, I think it's a semantic issue. I think it's a language issue. I think the problem is you have the first sentence of condition 9 talks about a hydroacoustic monitoring plan, and then further on down it talks about a hydroacoustic monitor, and they're really talking about two different things. I think if we change the first sentence to simply say a hydroacoustic noise mitigation plan, it would be clear. And the noise mitigation plan simply means you come in and say, we're using this vibratory hammer, right?
Right. But isn't it, I don't have it in front of me, I should, isn't it conditioned on the use that the monitor is only required upon a pile driver? As if a vibratory hammer, then it is not required.
It says in the instance anything other than a vibratory hammer is to be used for pile driving activities. The plan shall provide for a hydroacoustical monitor.
Right, so it's essentially a moot point. If they use a vibratory hammer, then they don't have to
They don't have to do anything except tell the department that they're using a vibratory hammer. And there was I don't know, we might want to use, there was some jetting instrument.
And I don't think that's allowed anymore because of sedimentation.
It is.
It is? Okay.
So would we want to say hydroacoustic hammer, anything other than a vibratory hammer or jet?
Well, the jet would trigger the requirement for the plan, right?
I think Kathy had some information on the jetting technique.
Maybe I can clarify. Yes, jetting is still allowed. So basically, when you do a vibratory hammer, the pile is vibrated down into the sand. Jetting has water that goes on the inside of the pile or outside of the pile and actually jets the mud out of the way as the pile goes down. It doesn't make any noise, really. It's a method of getting the pile in there. The conventional hammer is one that makes the loudest noise. So if jetting and vibratory hammer is like one category and conventional hammer is another category. So that's what we're trying to make sure that jetting gets in there too.
Okay, but doesn't the jetting create a sedimentation problem and a siltation problem?
It can, yes, but that would be something that we would be dealing with in any kind of other permit with a Regional Water Quality Control Board or possibly Army Corps of Engineers or something like that, because it's all dependent on regulations. So this is just pertaining to noise only, so from a noise perspective, jetting doesn't cause any extra noise.
Okay, thank you.
So that would be my proposal, just say, change hydroacoustic monitoring to hydroacoustic noise mitigation plan and add other than a vibratory hammer or jetting. And then I think it says essentially the same thing as what Kathy was submitting. And it's a little more clear, I think.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
We're not acting on it tonight anyway. We're simply giving them input. So.
You're giving us direction.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much for reminding us of that, Kathy. Okay, so then we will conclude our public hearings and move on to our new business, which is our goals and objective discussion, where, we've got to tell the council what they should do. Okay, only kidding.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. So we have quite a list of things here. Scott, did you want to give us some comments to begin?
Yeah, I have a
Kind of get
presentation
us
for you.
Oriented?
It's brief. So this is our FY 17-18 goals and objectives discussion. We're starting it about 6 months before these things would be, go into implementation. A little bit of the sort of background and schedule behind this, and how this plays out moving forward is that I'm here before you. It's December, and we're going to have the conversation about things that you'd like to see in that goals and objective schedule. In January or February of 2017, we'll work on the work plans, which is sort of how we put the goals and objectives into the work plan for the Planning Commission, and what that looks like, including timelines and those types of things about when we expect to get to the things that we develop for the goals and objectives. Council scheduled on February 28th to review and approve the FY 17 and 18 goals and objectives. In March of next year, you will be finalizing the work plans that are associated with that. And then in April, you'll have a joint meeting with the City Council to go over those work plans, followed by Council approving the final work plans in May of 2017. We have, that's a horrible slide, I apologize. We do have the FY 16, that was supposed to be 16, 17. Sorry for the typo at the top. Goals and objectives. I was going to give you a little bit of a status update. You have it in your staff report as well. These are really the goals and objectives related to your work plan that was adopted by council for this current fiscal year. We are looking at. I'm going to get the right slide here. Under goals section 3, we have several items in there. We have update the general plan and LCP. We're in process on that, obviously. We're almost about a year into this now. That's going to be ongoing, and that will continue into FY 17 and 18. So you'll see that come forward on the next goals and objectives and your next work plan. It was also an item to include a comprehensive update of the zoning code into the general plan and LCP update. That item's complete. City Council's authorized that, and so we are moving forward on that now. One of the items was to put together a master plan for the WRF site on the Rigetti property. We're not putting it on the Rigetti property at this point. The first site is Tri-AW now, and they are moving forward with a WRF master plan, water reclamation facility master plan. That draft is out now currently, so it's actually posted online as well if you'd like to look at that. But they've master planned the whole site with some options, I think, for whether it would have a courtyard or not at it. So those plans are online now, and they've been presenting those to the public. Work on a wireless ordinance is in our current goals and objectives. We just started this. Whitney is the planner that's working on that, and she's about 2 weeks into starting work on that. We've gotten some input from our city attorney's office on some recent ones that they've worked on, and so once we have that sort of put together, a little more put together, we'll bring it forward for discussion with the Planning Commission. That's scheduled to be done in quarter 3/4 of this current fiscal year, and so that's where it's taking place. We're supposed to be completing the downtown waterfront strategic plan right now. That is underway. We're expecting a final draft for staff review in January, and then the Planning Commission, probably through a joint session, will be reviewing that with the City Council in February, potentially March at the latest. We were to adopt the 2016 building code. We've done that. That'll take place. That'll take effect a couple of weeks into January. the new building code becomes, 2016 building code becomes effective January 1 because it's adopted by the state. It's our local amendments that, technically don't become in effect for another 2 weeks after that because of when council adopted it at the last meeting. We did have an item that was associated with that talked about bringing forward potential changes to the code to make mandatory gray water systems and potential solar-ready implementation for new projects. Didn't bring that forward as part of the building code because it's a little late at that point to put it in there. And when looking at what other cities are doing, they're typically including those into zoning code standards, so that you know up front that you have to do that, as opposed to a got you when you submit to the building department. And that made a lot of sense to me, and so I sort of pulled that out, and we'll be having that discussion moving forward. I would also note that it already is included in our current green building incentives program that we have, so people can come in if they want to put those concepts into their projects. They can get reduced building permit fees. Because the city's not done much to promote that program, we're starting to do that as well. I have an intern right now working on a new flyer for us. We're going to put it on the front of our website and maybe start doing some Facebook posts and those types of things, and maybe putting a handout thing at our front counter so people know about it. And I was thinking about putting that handout also and attaching it to the city's planning application forms. So maybe we could get some folks to take advantage of it, because you get some pretty good discounts if you want to go through it. And we don't have folks that are taking advantage of it now. So maybe we're going to try to make it a little more well-known and see if we can't get some folks to take advantage of it so we can get some projects to come forward that are using it. So that's the idea there. The next piece of this is looking at items from goal section 6, working collaboratively with both the Planning Commission and the Central Coast Aquarium. That project's taken a little while to come forward. They have consent of landowner. City manager has authority to extend that consent of landowner, and I believe that Mr. Buckingham is doing that at this point. They are working through getting a USDA loan for somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 to $20 million. That should be finalized either by the end of this month or maybe early next. We're sort of waiting to hear about that, but that's pretty exciting. So this project's got pushed back quite a ways. So I would see this probably extending out of this current fiscal year into next. So I could see that moving on to your goals and objectives for next fiscal year. We're working on an economic development code scrub. That's item 6I. That's actually under the direction of the deputy city manager who we've recently hired, but also involves us because it'll deal with some zoning code update issues. That's supposed to start this coming quarter and extend into maybe quarter 3, 4 of this current fiscal year. We're working on potentially allowing food trucks in the city. We have a prohibition against them right now. That's also was working through the deputy city manager's office as well, and so that deals with zoning, and so that'll be something that the planning commission has to take a look at. Probably that'll be looking in quarter 3, 4 of this current fiscal year to resolve. Bringing the Market Plaza project forward. That's sort of looking at the Centennial Plaza area, DeStasio's property, parking lot below it, and the parking lot that was associated with DeStasio's. We'll be having a conversation at the second meeting in January with the City Council about potentially going out with a request for qualifications on that. And so we'll see what their input is on that, and we may be going out with that and within this fiscal year. That will be a project, though, that if we do that, it'll extend well into the next fiscal year and possibly beyond that for processing and those types of things if an applicant comes forward. We have the sign ordinance right now. We're wrapping up the last couple of tweaks to it right now, and we'll be working with the chamber to identify dates for meetings with the 4 sign commercial areas in town. And hopefully we'll be done with that by the end of this fiscal year as well, and then sort of teeing it up to be incorporated into the zoning code update associated with the general plan and LCP update. We've been working on housing element implementation. We finally got the density bonus approval through Coastal Commission. They ratified that in December. We've been working on that since I got here. And we were finally able to get a bow put on that, and we just got the approval back about 2 weeks ago. So that's good. So we've done one implementation piece. One of the key issues and policies that's identified by the General Plan Advisory Committee in our General Plan and LCP update involves affordable housing and potential policy changes there. So we might be getting some direction out of that process as well. We'll be having a joint meeting in January with the Planning Commission and City Council where that'll be discussed in greater depth. So you'll get to talk with the City Council about that. January 11th, I think, is when we're having it.
Can I ask a question, Scott? One of the things I've noticed, as you know, state law says you have to provide certain concessions in response to community housing. Some cities, but they don't say what concessions you have to provide. They say, here's some that you can't. It has to be from this list. Some cities have said, we'll provide these concessions, but not these concessions. Is that something that Morro Bay is considering doing, saying?
So that is something that it's worthwhile, is a worthwhile conversation to have for sure. What it is, they can ask for anything, and you have to have some pretty good justifications to deny people when they make those requests. But it is good to be in front of those and say, we would prefer that our preference is that you use these concessions, and then you provide justifications for those, and you adopt those in some either a resolution format or just through code, and it can put those preferences out there so people know, and so they'll know that they have a smoother process if they use the preferred concessions versus some of the others that might otherwise be available to them. Some things we probably can't do because they're also in our LCP, like, our concession is for height. We need an extra story. Well, can't really give that to you. Right. Our LCP limits height in the city, and you can't override that through housing. So those are some things that can't actually take place, whereas in other cities they might not be able to say no to those types of things potentially.
Well, but perhaps a good rationale for discussing it kind of early is that if the city as a group decides we really don't, these concessions we're really not in favor, that could be included in the GPLCP revision.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's the place for it, really. A lot of the stuff that we're doing related to code, stuff that's sort of outside the general plan LCP update is going to be put into the general plan and LCP update because it involves the zoning code update. So we're working sort of outside of that framework with the sign ordinance, but we're going to get done with it, and it's going to sit there and wait to get plugged into that because coastal won't take it separately. We're well down that road, and they want to see a comprehensive document. They don't want us to be piecemealing things from this point forward, really. They sort of reluctantly took the last couple things we sent up there and have been processing them and sent them back, that density bonus, but they really didn't. They said, moving forward, we really prefer that you give it all to us at one time as a comprehensive document, so we're tracking everything, comprehensively, so.
Scott, since we have questions, what about design standards for the downtown and the Embarcadero area?
Yep, so those will be coming forward as part of the downtown waterfront strategic plan. They're finalizing those right now. And we're going to have an administrator.
Who is finalizing
Michael
this?
Baker International.
Okay.
They're a consultant for the general plan and LCP update and the downtown waterfront strategic plan. So we'll be getting design guidelines for both of those areas. Some of the design guidelines will be similar. Some of them will be different for the two areas based on input that we've received from the public. Okay, so I think... So some of the stuff I mentioned, so this is getting into the things potentially that you could look at and see coming forward under Goal 3, because we're not changing the main goals, we'll be changing objectives underneath them. If you have other goals that you want the City Council to consider, certainly we can add those to the list, and the Council can make a decision about whether they want to add to the 10 that we have. But really what we're looking at is objectives underneath those goals. And so Goal 3 is update and review significant city land use plans. Again, what I had said previously is the general plan and LCP update will continue into the next fiscal year, so this will be on the upcoming list. One of the items we had to take a look at that the Planning Commission's talked about is flagpoles, and the Council's talked about this as well. So that might be something that we can address moving forward in FY 17-18. Internally, we've talked about a manufactured home policy. That's a good one to put on the list for us to tackle, I think, for the upcoming fiscal year. And then have a maybe larger discussion about, if we want to have mandatory gray water and solar policies, or do we want to keep it an incentive program? I think that's a great discussion to have, as part of the goal setting process. Parking is going to be something that continues on through the general plan and LCP update. So that'll come forward, and it will extend probably into the next fiscal year based on where we're at.
Then Scott, also on the green building incentive program or the solar ready, do we have anything at the subdivision level that would require subdivisions to be laid out for solar access, for gray water management, for different, maybe communal, something like a communal heat pump, ground.
We don't have any requirements for that in our current codes. Correct, we don't. But I mean, again, something that if we add them into our goals and objectives, and the council's been interested in this as well. So I think that this is a worthwhile discussion, and where we want to implement this. Do you want these to apply them to single-family homes that are doing it, remodels, additions, or do you want to do it more like for subdivisions when you're coming in with 2, 3, 4 plus homes? Then it makes more sense, and they're doing a comprehensive, more comprehensive plan than maybe one-offs for single-family homes. I don't know. That's the conversation we should be having, though. And there's interest in the community, and there seems to be interest on council to have that discussion, and the planning commission's mentioned it several times. So, bringing that forward. Under Goal 6, to support economic development, these are all things that are continuing out of this fiscal year, and will likely move into 17, 18, and that's the aquarium project that I mentioned before. The economic code scrub will probably continue through that because it'll be part of the general plan and LCP. Food trucks and Market Plaza, I already mentioned all those. Other items that you could potentially give consideration to is relooking at compact infill. Certainly the commission's mentioned that in the past, and that does kind of need to be looked at, so that would be a good one. Commercial design guidelines, we're going to have them for the downtown and waterfront. Maybe we want to start with those and look at applying those to Quintana and North Main and seeing if we can come up with new other ones for those areas. They're pretty distinct locations, and we probably could work through that potentially. And then this is also part of the general plan and LCP key issues and policies identification, and that's historic resources. That's in those documents, and so that might be something that could come out, but it's probably going to be more identified in the general plan and LCP, and then there'll be something we do in the future to develop those policies after we implement the general plan. But it's something that the council's talked about and the planning commission's talked about, so I think it's worth a discussion. If you're interested in having that with the council, that's moving forward. There's just through the next fiscal year, while we're working on the general plan and LCP update, we're going to have to be judicious in how we choose things, because what I've found now I'm almost a year into this is we're spending double the amount of time that I had anticipated. And so there's not a lot of time for staff to do other stuff and still process projects, and we don't really have the ability to add staff. And so we probably can do just about anything, we just can't do everything. And so the discussion here, hopefully this evening, is: do you have other items you want me to add to the list? Are there specific, 5 of these that we absolutely want to make sure that those are the prioritized ones and whatnot? And that's kind of what I want to hear from you. This is basically the end of my presentation. So.
I have a couple questions. One is this idea of efficiency. Like tonight we looked at another piece of the waterfront. And is there any benefit to us having joint meetings with the harbor group? Because, they're looking at things that are going to eventually impact us. We look at things all the time, like we talked about this correlation between the walkways and things like that. This thing strikes me as always being looked at very piecemeal. And then when you split it between 2 different interest spheres, you lose potential, synergy there too.
I don't know how much conversation the Harbor Advisory Board has had related to waterfront master plan implementation, what things look like down here, what the waterfront access looks like. I don't know what their level of interest is there and what the conversations they've had previously. It was something I'd have to touch base with Eric Endersby, the harbor director, because I'm not familiar. He's never mentioned it to me as something that's on their radar. You may all know different. You've been certainly engaged with the city longer than I have. So
I think about things like the boat haul out and things like that. You know, there's just things that sort of appear out of nowhere conceptually that, wow, it'd be nice if we had input on that. And I think it has to do with any committee that's out there doing things like, I'm going to try to find time now that my grading and maybe my Christmas shopping is pretending to be done, to look at the water reclamation facility draft, because, you know, one of the things that always bothers me is we have tree ordinances and things like that, but I think there's a net loss of trees. We ask people to replace at a certain ratio, but I think there's still a net loss of trees. It concerns me we aren't looking at having a strategy with people like Parks and Recreation. Where are there some tree banks around that we should be reforesting Morro Bay? You know, so we've got this restorative kind of landscape thing. You know, the whole thing about the taking away, you know, some of the landscape up in Panorama area. You know, it'd be nice to identify zones in the city that, in addition to ESHAs, might actually be, you know, landscape enhancement areas, or we're trying to wild the city a bit more. And I don't know how to explain that, other than it just seems to me like we might want to look at, when we see things being lost, not only replacing them on the property, but adding to a bank somewhere. I think all the raptor population we must be losing, with probably a significant net loss of trees, at least in the near term, in the state park and things like that.
Yeah, the state parks had, you know, a lot of pretty significant die-off of trees that they've been clearing out for, you know, over the last couple of years.
The drought stressed a lot of systems. We should be looking at trying to be restorative, especially if we're starting to look at different thinking with you know, stormwater runoff and things like that, and different strategies. The other thing that struck me is it's kind of spread out to a bunch of different issues. This thing about the RVs and the flag poles and things like that. It's kind of a yard appropriateness. You know, we have this one citizen that's spoken to us several times about the antenna and things in the yard area. And I'm actually very concerned that we get ahead of some ability to start putting wireless things on private residences. You know, I really am very concerned that once we start seeing them infiltrate the streetscape right-of-ways, now we're going to start having, well, can't I put one on my roof next to your house? And, you know, I think we ought to be ahead of the game on what's appropriate to put in these yards. You know, we've demarcated where the building zone is supposed to be, and I think it would be appropriate to have a discussion about, when we get into some of these issues, what's appropriate to have in yards. What can I expect my neighbor to put in the yard when they start working on their house? And it may be district by district eventually, but, you know, that's something. And then I think I'm very concerned about the way we start to influence water use with the gray water. I think that's very important, that we have a good discussion about, you know, mandates versus incentives. I don't think, I'd almost, if we had some staff, I'd actually want to know who's taken advantage of that in the last 5 years. And I bet it's nobody. Or
I've looked into it a little bit, and I've not seen where we've, at least in the last 2.5 to 3 years, where anybody's come forward for the incentive program, which is one of the reasons why I'm ramping up right now to do some promotion of it, because I started looking at that and I was like, really? Nobody? And so that, you know, also covers the preceding 6 months before I got here. There's a little bit of, our tracking system's not great with stuff like this, and so I've had to rely on some memories, and those are, you know, traditionally not great. So
it's something for a hearing. I just think it's really appropriate. My own personal feeling is you end up having people building $800,000, $900,000 houses, and they have done nothing to help us mitigate water, power use at all. And I think that's going to bite us in the butt someday. I guess that's about it. I mean, like I say, the idea of the wastewater treatment plant master plan was the thing that got me thinking about the trees, because they're sort of sited in a little holler there, as we would say back in Pennsylvania, where I'm from. And the idea that they're producing recyclable water, it would seem to me one of the things we could do is to start recycling some on the site and actually build up a copse of trees that protects the Route 1 corridor.
Mhm.
And also provide some maybe wind protection and, so aesthetic mitigation, reforesting. If we're going to end up having kind of a trail to the Choro Basin, we might as well forest it. Just what happens with rivulets when they get enough water on them around here.
Yeah, we actually had, when I was in Pismo, we had Chumash Park, and we used that park in a lot of situations where folks were required to replace trees and really couldn't fit them all on site, or didn't make sense to fit them on site. And so we used that as a mitigation bank. We planted some additional oak trees out there and things like that. It was a great solution because we had that available to us, so we could put them there. I think, if we were able to work out something with state parks along those lines to replace some of the trees they've lost or what have you, I think looking into that, I think is actually a pretty interesting concept. I mean, getting a response back from state park might be the difficult part, but having the conversation at least worthwhile.
Do we have I'm also kind of interested in, we had the treatment plant site at one point on 41. We looked at some of those areas. Those things obviously are going to be in play in the county at some point. Are we monitoring what LAFCO's or what the county's doing with some of these boundary conditions?
So we're in the process of reviewing our sphere of influence right now with LAFCO. We have a memorandum with the county, and it covers properties that go way out into the county, around the city, kind of like what our old sphere of influence used to be. So we have this memorandum that has a map on it that says, hey, anytime something happens on any of these properties surrounding the city, the county will contact us. If they have pre-construction meetings or something with those folks, they will invite us to those meetings. And we can give them the opportunity for ones that are on our borders for them. I don't know that they'd ever come, but it sort of says both of those reciprocal type things. And I'm working on that document right now to give it back to LAFCO for potential changes and things like that. But we do have that in place now, and that's the requirements, and the county knows that. I don't know how often we do regularly get stuff from them when things are on our border. When things go a little bit further inland, sometimes we don't get them, although I did receive some of the applications that Chevron was processing for lot line adjustments. They've had 2 or 3 different ones trying to move some of their lot configurations around, and I did receive notice of those. So we do have that in place, and that's something that we're revisiting. I have a meeting in January with LAFCO and the county.
One of the, and you were talking in terms of tree banking, but there's there's an awful lot of residential trees that have been lost in Morro Bay because of disease, primarily myoprim thrip and then pine pitch canker. So private citizens may be part of the tree bank. In other words, it might be reasonable to have a program that says, you want a tree for your yard? We got a free one,
Yeah.
And the other thing is, the city itself owns a lot of isolated bits of property throughout the city, and those might be sites to be reforested as well. The most of them are little small areas that are not useful for anything commercial.
Yeah, I don't think it would be difficult to, at a minimum, put together a map of all the city properties where potentially we could do these types of things and then prioritize them and say, that's where we would want them to go, and those look like good locations for them. And then I think, reaching out to state parks would be a good idea too. It wouldn't be a bad idea since, that whole area is, kind of within our sphere and within the city, so.
It's also a school district. The school district owns an immense amounts of property that affect us. When the solar projects went into the high school, there was a lot of discussion about how the mature trees were starting to be lost. Yeah. And I don't know what they've got in terms of long-term plans or, there's that massive, I imagine it's a stormwater area at the cloisters along the west side of Route 1 that, for the most part, looks like it's just stones for the most part.
Yeah.
I don't know what could happen there. I'm just saying there's a lot of little places here that we could work with partners to try to enhance some of our treescape.
Well, in fact, and that would actually help us out with our climate action plan, because it identifies one of the measures is planting a certain number of trees, and I forget the number, but it's a lot. And we haven't been doing that. In fact, I think I kind of agree with the sentiment of the commission is we've probably been losing more than we've been planting, net anyway. And so having a program that dealt with that would be good. And I've had experience with it in the past, and it worked out pretty well. So it seems like it would be viable.
Scott, it seems, and Mike, you've got a lot on your plate, where there's a lot that's actually going on in the planning and community development department that we never had going before. Mm-hmm. So I want to really commend you on that. And I think, it'd be great to see these projects through and not try to load you up with our wishes and desires. But one of the things that does bother me is we tend to see projects and we tend to see initiatives too far along, where it doesn't seem like we have the input that there is expertise on this commission that could help with. So if there's any way we could get into the discussion at the scoping, at the plan initiation phases, that would help the projects go along smoother.
This is a really interesting concept, and one that is on my list of things to add into the zoning code, and that is to include a concept review component to this. So projects in the early phases can come before the planning commission, and there's no discretionary permit on the line. Probably something that had a fee associated with it because it takes money to get it here, but we would credit that fee against any future application that they made. And that you would have the ability to have a conversation with the applicant. They would show you plans. We would do a staff report for it, kind of similar to a project, and you'd have more of a back and forth about things that you like, things that you don't like, things you'd like them to consider. I've used that for years when I was in Pismo Beach, and most of any significant project that came forward would take advantage of those type of things, and we would encourage them to do it. And it ends up being a little bit of it makes the process more collaborative.
Right.
And then it's actually pretty good, because the applicant can go away and say, I heard all of this, here's all the changes that I made in response to your comments, and then these are the ones I couldn't make, and this is why. And so you get a pretty good explanation about it, and my experience with that is it's been very positive and well received by the development community, and that is something that I absolutely want to add into our zoning code once we update it. So, and that could be one of the things that we add to the list is to do something along those lines, if that's consistent with what you were talking about.
Yeah, that is part of it. But even on the, for specific plans or specific projects, I think that's really important. Like one of the things that really bothers me is almost the punitive nature of our discussions. These people put a lot of money into developing plans where there's an obvious something that's obvious to us, but they didn't see it, and so then we're requiring them to go back and redevelop the plans, and with all of the costs involved in both money and expensed time. And so if we could get up in front on these projects as a concept meetings where maybe it's even more informal. Maybe it's not, however we have to satisfy the Brown Act, but to be more collaborative. But also on the larger initiatives too, like the present LCP, GP, update. I feel like because I don't have time to go to those meetings, I'm kind of left in the dark about a lot of that, and I'm afraid we're going to be getting those. We're going to be dropped on. We're going to have 800 pages dropped on us and told, okay, well here you go.
So that's a good point. All of the material for the Plan Mora Bay effort is online right now. So all of the draft documents, all the baseline information, all the key policy issues documents are on there right now that in draft formats. You can see all of those whenever you want to look at them. They're on the website. You're going to start seeing a lot more stuff out of this. The General Plan Advisory Committee, that's their job. Their job is to deal with all of the baseline stuff. all the way through policy generation. Really, it doesn't get to the planning commission until we start getting into the policy development ideas. And so right now, starting in January, you're going to start seeing this stuff, and you're going to start seeing it on a regular basis.
Okay.
And you're going to see some of it come back, and it's going to be, you're going to be much more involved. To this point, it's been mostly background information to this point, but now you're going to get to roll your sleeves up and sort of get to weigh in and provide, comment related to what you see and what you do. And I think this is the appropriate time, and so that's why we're going to be starting to engage you more frequently. It just wasn't necessary before because a lot of the stuff was background stuff that we were putting together. And that's what the General Plan Advisory Committee was put together to do, was to do that. Really, as the policy stuff comes forward, it'll be, Planning Commission and Council sort of, weighing in on those things.
And I do think we need to include a sustainable subdivision standards. However you want to call it, green subdivisions or sustainable subdivisions. I think that would help us with a lot of different things, such as with our climate action plan. It would help us with our housing element. It would help us with, the concept in general of a sustainable community. And I think we're going to be seeing some of these larger portions come forward. The Panorama site, I think the Chevron site, there's, and even PUDs, this would give a good basis for some of the larger PUD sites that are going to be coming forward.
Yeah.
So if we can include that in the LCP, the GP-LCP update, I think that would be helpful. And then where are we on the haul-out facility?
One of the goals, our objectives for the Harbor Department and the HAB is to go through the feasibility, to develop a feasibility study, and I believe the RFP went out on that. So I don't know that they've picked or interviewed yet. They might have. I'd have to go back and look at the timeline. I haven't seen Eric in a little while, so I'm not sure where that's happened. We've sort of not had a bunch of the staff meetings that we normally have, and so I haven't not really up to speed on it. But I have to go look. But it was recently going on, so I think we might either be releasing it. It might be released, or they're getting ready to. I'm not sure which. I'd have to go find out and come back.
And in the LCP GP update, are we doing specific, more like specific area plans, or are we doing different zoning requirements or community standards or building standards for different areas, or such as North Morro Bay? So
we're just now starting to talk about land use. I mean, the General Plan Advisory Committee sort of dipped their toes in it a little bit. I mean, but we're really just starting the conversation about that. We're actually been working internally, using one of our interns, trying to get our current maps aren't accurate, and we have split zoning all over the city, and identifying where those are, and because we don't want to continue that. We want to have zoning that's parcel specific, and so we want to fix a lot of that because it creates problems when projects comes forward. And then what do you tell somebody when you're staff? Well, it's split, so it could be this, and then how does that work? That's a terrible thing to have, and people, when you tell them that, they're like, not super interested in picking up that mess, and so it ends up being a disincentive for people to move forward with projects on those properties, and so it's not great. So we've been working through the map to fix those types of things, identify those issues, so we can bring them forward to the General Plan Advisory Committee for their review and get what their input on what they think things should be, and then once we have that all dialed in, then we move on to, hey, what should the land uses and stuff be? General Plan Advisory Committee will work through that, and then their recommendations will come forward to you and the City Council for your review and your thoughts on that process. So that's kind of how that works. And we're just now getting into policy discussions, and that'll be moving forward from this point on. I would say also that General Plan update process was scheduled to be complete in pretty much a year from now, December of 2017. I'm going to be, from this point forward, saying it's probably going to extend into 2018, probably at least the first quarter, because we got additional grant funding in August, and we still don't have the grant agreement in place with the Coastal Commission on that, so we haven't been able to start any of that work. 4 months from when they awarded the grant. This is partially because the Coastal Commission is working their way through what they want to see in association with grant reporting, and they're sort of making, they're sort of working their way through it. Said, oh, we didn't like some of the stuff we're seeing, so we want to fix it, and so it's sort of this moving target a little bit. But that delay is going to push us forward into the next year. So, while it was supposed to originally be end of 2017, it's probably going to be beginning of 2018.
Okay, great. I'll be brief. With respect to the cellular installations, I've brought this up several times already. Any thought of kind of independent vetting of these proposals as they come forward? Because right now, the cellular company essentially gets to design their plan, and then they come to us in a piecemeal fashion and say that this is essentially what it must be because this is the only one that's really feasible, and they don't typically define feasible. So I still think we're going to always be handicapped if we don't have somebody outside their purview who can say, well, there are 2 other ways to do this. They may double the cost for you, but they're just as advantageous in terms of broadcast and safety. That's one thing. The other thing is with respect to affordable housing, and I guess it really here means higher density zoning. Are we likely to get like a specific geographic area or areas within Morro Bay which will be specifically designed for higher density? Or will it be sort of if there's a developer who's interested in doing something like come and talk to us because we're disposed to do that in his places as yet undetermined? I'm not sure how that's going to work.
Well, it kind of depends. I think all of that stuff is on the table, from the consideration standpoint. Like I was saying just a few minutes ago, we're not really to the policy development standpoint. We're starting that right now, and part of that is getting the land use maps corrected, and so that's the first step. And then we jump into full-blown policy discussions and what that looks like. So that's certainly things that are potentially on the table. It's also probably putting in policies that encourage like say in the downtown having residential units above and those types of things. The DWSP will help with that. And probably speak to it to some extent. And then I think the general plan, LCP, and zoning code will pick up on that as well. There may be other areas in town where we want to do that. And then certainly one way is to increase density. There are other things you can do to sort of help out with that too. It's, maybe we have limitations, maybe we encourage smaller houses. I think Chair Teff's talked about that many times. Maybe, we have incentives in our ordinance, so you get affordable by design a little bit. There's a lot of cities going to that right now. I've seen a lot of policy, discussions on that, and they're incentivizing having smaller houses, so the housing is more affordable, and that's again the affordable by design concept. And then disincentivizing larger mansionization, making it difficult to get to those much larger homes. And it's all kind of open for discussion at this point.
Okay. Part of that something very useful came out of that planning academy that Richard and I attended. Particularly within San Luis Obispo, there's very worthwhile value in maintaining the open space or the periphery of the city. But then, of course, that creates a scarcity of housing within the circle, which causes the values to rise. And then, of course, it's the very people who have been the beneficiaries of that increase in property values are the first to say decrying greater density in their neighborhoods because it decreases their property value. And so they're sort of, in a sense, and why am I saying that? Because I'm anticipating that as soon as the issue of greater density arises, a lot of people saying, not in my backyard, and we're going to have to sort of address that notion of we're benefiting from increased property values, and in some ways it's a burden, but that we can't have it both ways.
Yeah, I mean, you can see us also looking at policies in certain areas of town, maybe the downtown, where we're looking, and we've been
Yeah.
talking with Coastal about increasing our height limits a little bit, because you really can only get two-story buildings, so we can't get, maybe the density that we're looking for. It's difficult to get those residential units above because our existing buildings are small. Their footprints are small, so it doesn't allow you to put much on top of them. And there are appropriate locations in town to do things like that, to have maybe some that are a little bit taller, so we can get some of that increased density. More people in the downtown improves the business atmosphere down there. People are shopping down. I mean, it's all builds on itself. I mean, these are concepts that you've all heard before, but our policies right now don't allow us to do them. It is, and you will see this in January with the joint meeting that you're going to have with the city council. This is a identified key issue by the General Plan Advisory Committee as part of that process, and so you'll see that.
And then the last question I have is with respect to the PG&E plant. Do we know anything about what their plans are for that? I mean, I sat in at a meeting where one was presenting, offshore electrical generation, but do we know anything more realistic?
That was the Trident Wind concept, and there's another company that's come forward now as part of the RFP process that BOEM, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, released. So now there's a couple of folks that are looking at that same space out there. They're a Norwegian company or something. That sounds somewhat familiar. I could be wrong. That was looking at it. As the plant itself, the redevelopment of that, there have been folks looking at it, kicking the tires on it. Some of the, disincentives there is Dynegy originally was packaging them together with their Moss Landing and Oakland sites, and so you have to take all three. And so that's ends up kind of weird because, you're talking about power generation companies picking up Moss Landing and Oakland to use them as power generation facilities. What are they picking up the Morro Bay piece for? They need to partner with people that do redevelopment, brownfield redevelopment, those types of things. And so we've had some inquiries about things like that. So there are people that are talking to Dynegy right now about it. And I think some of the questions are whether they're willing to break their holdings in California in pieces, or whether they're dead set on selling them together. And so there are active conversations happening, but that's about the extent of it. I mean, it hasn't been much more than that. And they're really, trying to work through with Dynegy about what that looks like. And so.
Scott, on that too, there's a whole infrastructure of pipelines, both, littoral, go through the coastal developments, the coastal zone and the surf zone and the tidal zone and stuff that go out to moorings out there. And there's also pipelines that from the power plant up to tank farms and, then out to the mooring fields, and then pipelines that go from Panorama that go to Tulare or Kern, stuff like that, Lemoore. So there's this whole network of infrastructure that seems like we're abandoning, that we couldn't replicate, in the future. So, some of those uses might be kinetic storage for wind farms where they can kinetically store water, and then as it falls, they regenerate the electricity for off-peak use and stuff like that. Is there any way that we can map those to see if there's any use to those?
Well, we have access and rights to the outfall lines that we have. Dynegy is, as part of their decommissioning of the plant, is required to remove, or at least look into the feasibility of removing, the pipelines that go out into the ocean, and coming back through the beach and removing those up into the property lines over there. That's part of the decommissioning requirements for the plant. And so several months ago, there were folks out there, you probably might have seen them, there were a bunch of survey folks in town that were mapping where those are located and looking what that, what does that look like, trying to remove them through the surf zone, is it possible? That's those types of things. So they've been sort of evaluating that because that's part of the decommissioning process. As is the demolition of a bunch of the outbuildings that recently happened. Those types of things are all part of that. And we've had inquiries from Trident. I mean, why did Trident come talk to us? Well, the outfall lines are there, and then we have the PG&E's transfer station that sits behind there. So they could work a deal out with the city. They could use those lines that Dynegy deeded over to the city, bring them all the way up into within 150 feet of the PG&E substation that's back there, transfer station. And then you only have to go 150 feet to get it in there. And so those things could happen. That's why people are interested in it. That's why the wind farm idea is, out in the water is sort of interesting to folks, because we do have the connection. There's an amount of power generation that goes along with the plant that you can acquire, and then there's ways to bring infrastructure in through, that's existing into the site, so you don't have to rip up the city to do it. Those are all things that are very attractive to the power generation companies, which is why you're starting to you have not only Trident, but this other company that's looking at it now. So we've looked at that part of it. I don't know that we've spent much time, looking at anything related to the Panorama site, because the existing pipeline still goes, through the city, and probably terminates somewhere near the beach. I don't know how far much we took out. I never saw a plan for that.
It seems like, the Coastal Commission is tending, and I'm probably on a soapbox, I shouldn't say this, but they're tending to want to abandon or decommission these and remove them, where it seems like it's a resource that should be looked at to be used, and repurposed.
And certainly that's what we're doing with I think we have no intention from the city standpoint of, once we had the lines that go to the outfall, of doing anything other than, looking for options later on that might be able to accommodate some other use for those. The city doesn't have any plans to get rid of those at this point.
Well, I will be brief too, because I just have a couple of things. I think one of the things that I have not seen addressed in anything other than maybe a little bit in the GPLCP process, but is the issue of homelessness. It's a reality. It exists here in Morro Bay. We should have a strategy to deal with it. Part of which is local, part of which would have to be collaborative with other cities and areas adjacent to us. One of the big things one of the important things I think that we need to deal with, and as a planning commission we could be very helpful in this, is code enforcement. I think we need to move from being a community where many of our codes are ignored by almost everybody, to a city that has some kind of sense that you can do these things and you can't do those things, and where I think the Planning Commission can play a big role in this is, frankly, a lot of our codes are unenforceable, or very open to interpretation, and in the short term, as we move through the process of beginning to put some teeth into our codes, this body can help with resolutions and interpretations and saying, this is the way we interpret it. This is the way the city sees this piece of code. So, I think that's kind of the precursor to having the new zoning ordinance come out, is we get people used to the idea of these ordinances mean something,
Yeah.
And the other thing I would just say to the council, as a as a general thing, is to try and see things as a whole. For example, we've mentioned compact infill. Well, to me, compact infill belongs as part of a general discussion on affordability of housing. And so to take one little bit of it, and work with that, and then you've got these other 4 or 5 bits that you didn't work with. It seems, number one, you start to duplicate effort. I think that some of the things that are being done in the downtown waterfront specific plan may overlap with things that are going to happen in the economic development strategic plan, may overlap with things that are going to happen in the waterfront master plan, so you begin to kind of do the same thing 2 or 3 different times instead of kind of once altogether. The flagpole thing is, I think Michael expressed this, I think it's very, very well. You know, the flagpole thing really is kind of more the question of how do we look at, as a community, how do we look at the outdoor environment as well as the built environment? You know, how do we look at yards? You know, so it's not just flagpoles, it's antennas, it's probably loud music, it's probably, you know, it's kind of like how do we view what do we want our outdoor environment to be like? So that's just my sort of, you know, general comment to the council is don't go in too many different directions at the time. Try and envelop things into the envelope they belong in, deal with all of them, and then, you know, move on.
Mm-hmm.
As if I should be giving advice to the council, but what the heck?
They're asking for it. That's why we're here. They want to know what you think. So.
Any final remarks on this topic? Then we will move on to Planning Commission comments on any other topics, anything future agenda. I think we've kind of took a shot at that one. Then Community Development Director comments. Scott.
I don't have anything today. Yeah.
Well, then with that, we will adjourn to our next regular meeting here at the Veterans Memorial Building on January 3rd, 2017, and happy holidays, everyone.